Chapter 1147. I hope he doesn't come back. Qin Yining closed her eyes tiredly and curled up even tighter. Bing Tang, Ji Yun, and the others all hung their heads. Their tear-stained faces were filled with despair. Of course, they knew that the emperor had set up an inescapable net. As long as Wang Yi stepped into Jing, only death awaited him. Wang Fei was extremely intelligent. She had probably predicted this day would come when she had been captured. However, they had been looking for a chance the entire time but had not been able to find a way to escape. If there was hope, who wouldn't want to live well? Wang Fei and Wang Yi had such a good relationship. Why wouldn't they want to be together forever and grow old together? However, the affairs of the world were unpredictable. It was not up to them. The icy air spread through the deathly silent prison. After the anger, everyone was only left with confusion. They were now in prison and had no way out. They really didn't know what new tricks Li Qitian would play. Wang Fei had killed the person sent by Li Qitian. What kind of tense situation would she face next? Qin Yining closed her eyes and wanted to rest. She didn't know what would happen later. However, when she calmed down, there was a splash of red in front of her eyes. The man surnamed Nya widened his eyes in disbelief as he held his neck. She felt very cold and dizzy. Her entire body was in pain. She hugged herself even tighter. At this time, Li Qitian had received the news from the Ministry of Justice's prison. He was extremely shocked. You are saying that Prince Zhongshuan's consort beat Nya to death? Yes. Nya threatened Wang Fei to have Wang Fei accompany him once. Wang Fei pretended to agree and found a chance to bite Nya's neck. The blood vessel there was broken. Li Qitian waved his hand in disbelief. He was angry that Nya had taken advantage of his work to do such a thing. However, he was even more shocked by Qin Yining's reaction. Isn't this woman a little too bold? She dared to bite someone to death. Was she still a woman? Most likely, normal men would not do such a thing. People said that the Qin clan grew up in the mountains before the age of 14. It seemed that this was true. However, when he thought about how Qin Yining was Pang Zhao's wife and how this woman was different from any other woman he knew, he felt even more jealous. Pang Zhishi was better than him in everything. The common people favored him. Pang Zhishi's wife was prettier than his. She was more than him. Li Qitian took a deep breath and suddenly stood up. All right. Very good. Her man is arrogant, and she doesn't put me in her eyes. I want to see for myself just how capable she is. She can only live if I let her live. If I want her to die, she has to die. Prepare. Everyone in the room agreed in unison. Xiong Jinshui was a bit worried. Your Majesty. It's cold outside. You. Get out of my way. Li Qitian strode out and kicked Xiong Jinshui to the side. The other eunuchs hurriedly followed. Some of them prepared carriages, horses, and cloaks. They were so busy that they fell off their horses. Xiong Jinshui endured the pain and got up. He scrambled to follow them. The prison cell in the Ministry of Justice's prison had just been cleaned up. Nya's body had also been carried out. Less than half an hour after it was locked up, there was a commotion outside the door. Your Majesty. The jailer was at a loss. He knelt on the ground and kowtowed several times. The emperor had come in person. The Minister of Justice, Assistant Minister, and other officials did not have time to rush over. However, the jailers suffered. They were so scared that their bones turned to jelly. They almost stuttered when they spoke. Nya was bitten to death. Yes, yes. Second Master Nya's neck was bitten. He died from blood loss. Li Qitian received confirmation. He sneered. Where is the Prince Zhongshuan's consort? In the prison. The jailer hurriedly got up and went to open the door. The eunuchs who followed Li Qitian felt that it was not appropriate for Emperor Fong to set foot in this place. However, Li Qitian did not care. He strode down the stairs and followed the jailer. The eunuchs and guards had no choice but to follow. Although it was snowing outside, it was warmer than inside the prison cell. As soon as they entered the prison, they were greeted by a cold, musty, and bloody smell. Li Qitian had lived like a prince for many years. He could not endure much hardship. He covered his mouth with his sleeve in disgust. Lead the way. Yes, yes. Several jailers carried lanterns and walked all the way to Qin Yining's prison cell. Li Qitian also disliked the filth in the prison cell. He was too lazy to look around. When he passed by Xiaoyu and the other cells, he did not even look at them. When he arrived at Bing Tang and the wet nurse's cell, he waved his hand to Xiong Jinshui behind him. Go, bring the two children out. Xiong Jinshui nodded and hurriedly called a few people to bring the two children over. The wet nurse, Bing Tang, Ji Yun, and the others all wanted to resist. Qin Yining had already stood up. His face was covered in blood, and his eyes were shining as he looked over. Li Qitian looked back and saw Qin Yining covered in blood in the dark environment. She looked like a red person. He was scared by her fierce expression. Then he laughed. TSK, isn't this the Prince Zhongshuan's consort? How did you end up like this? I didn't know that a woman could be so vicious. How can you bite someone to death? Did Peng Zhishi give this to you? The blood on Qin Yining's head and face had already dried up. Her long hair had become strands, and the blood on her face had also turned dark brown, making the whites of her eyes look exceptionally white. She really exuded a strange aura. Your Majesty, the children are innocent. You are a benevolent ruler. You won't do anything to the children of meritorious officials, right? Li Qitian sneered. The children of meritorious officials? May I ask who is the meritorious official? Is Pang Zhao's crime of disobeying the imperial edict not counted? Pang Zhao used his own money to provide disaster relief, pay for the prince, and expel the Tatars from De Zhou's disciple. Is this not counted? Whether it counts or not, it is up to me to decide. It is not up to a vicious woman like you to decide. Li Qitian walked to the door of Qin Yining's prison and grabbed the wooden fence. He gritted his teeth and said, I am the son of heaven, the master of this world. Why should he take all the benefits? Benefits? Risking our lives on the battlefield, risking our lives, not having enough to eat, not having enough to wear, not having enough food to eat, and not having enough to wear, not having enough food and pay, we still have to fight the Tatars. Qin Yining also threw caution to the wind at this time. He strode forward and looked at Li Qitian through the prison door. His words were particularly sonorous and forceful. For your country, for the sake of the people's stable lives, your subjects shed their blood outside, and did their duty without asking for anything in return. But what did you do? Your Majesty is not afraid of being ridiculed by the world if this matter is spread out? How will it be recorded in the history books? Li Qitian clenched his hands into fists and stared at Qin Yining's blood-stained face. He gritted his teeth and said, I am the son of heaven, and the son of heaven is the master of this world. Whoever I want to live can live. If I want someone to die, that person must die. Ridicule. Whoever dares to ridicule, I will send them to see the king of hell. It doesn't matter who the prince is, who pays the silver. All the lands in this world belong to the king. Is their silver not my silver? Only a vicious woman like you can speak fast here. Fatuous ruler. Qin Yining gritted his teeth and couldn't help but curse. Li Qitian's anger dissipated. Guards, Prince Zhongshuan's consort has been disrespectful. Lock her up in a prison cart and parade her through the streets. Tell everyone in the city that the blood on her body was spilled because she bit someone to death. Yes. Without waiting for the jailer to step forward, the imperial bodyguards and eunuchs took the key and opened the prison door. They entered the prison and dragged Qin Yining out. Qin Yining's body was covered with whip and rod wounds. His hands and feet were frostbitten. Just now, he had been hit on the head while he was struggling. At this time, he was so weak that he wished he could fall to the ground and never get up again. Li Qitian's imperial bodyguards didn't show any mercy. Qin Yining was dragged out of the prison with staggering steps. Princess! Princess! The crowd lamented. However, Li Qitian seemed to like hearing such cries. It was as if he saw Pang Xiao's people in such a sorry state, as if he saw Pang Xiao also in such a sorry state. The more miserable these people cried, the more comfortable he felt. Li Qitian couldn't help but laugh to the sky. The swaddling clothes in the arms of Xiong Jinshui and the eunuchs moved a little. Brother Xian and Sister Yun finally cried out in fear. In the midst of the chaos, the loud cries of the babies were particularly penetrating. The entire prison became quiet because of this. Xia Yu and the others' hearts skipped a beat. They stared at Li Qitian's direction without blinking. They were so nervous that they trembled. Right now, it was not the time for them to think of a solution. They were tied up and tightly locked up. Even if they wanted to rush out, they couldn't. Moreover, the young master and young miss were in Li Qitian's hands. As long as he said the word, these two children would die. They wanted to plead for mercy, but they also knew that it was useless. Li Qitian was simply inhumane. He didn't care whether he killed an ignorant child or not. He only wanted to feel good. With his hands behind his back, Li Qitian walked in front of Xiong Jinshui. He untied the swaddling clothes and looked at the baby wearing a tiger head hat. Then, he looked at the other child. For a moment, he clenched his fists. It was as if his patience had reached its limit. He wanted to strangle the child to death on the spot. His hand slowly stroked Brother Xian's weak and soft neck. He gradually exerted force. The crowd couldn't bear it any longer. Jingzhe was just about to curse when Xia Yu pulled him back. Xia Yu said loudly, Your Majesty, please reconsider. That's just a child. A child is innocent. Moreover, this child is more useful alive. Li Qitian didn't think that the child was innocent. Who told him to be unlucky and reincarnate as Pang Zhao's child? However, the last sentence successfully woke him up. He still wanted to use these two children as bait to lure Pang Zhao back to the capital. If he directly killed them, wouldn't he be forcing Pang Zhao to rebel? Right now, it was better to coax Pang Zhao back and make a long-term plan. Thinking of this, Li Qitian raised his hand, turned around, and walked out. Xiong Jinshui and the others immediately followed. Chapter 1148. Qin Yining was pushed out of the prison. Imperial bodyguards, palace servants, and officials from the Ministry of Justice were standing in front of the door. When they saw a woman covered in blood appear in front of them, they couldn't help but be shocked. Seeing that the eunuchs were preparing a prisoner carriage, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice and his superior looked at each other and went forward to ask about the situation in a low voice. The jailer said in a low voice, Your Majesty ordered that the princess be paraded through the streets. After saying that, he bowed his head and retreated. Not long after, a prisoner carriage was pushed over and someone went to lead the horse. Qin Yining was pushed into the prisoner carriage. The carriage was neither too high nor too low, so her head and hands were stuck on it. She couldn't stand up straight or squat down, so she could only squat. It was torturous. The Minister of Justice frowned. It had been many years since he had seen a serious criminal paraded through the streets like this. This Qin Yining was Prince Zhongshuan's wife. What kind of unforgivable evil thing could she have done to make the emperor so angry? Li Qitian strode out with the divine empress followed by the eunuchs and guards. 2 eunuchs were holding swaddling clothes in their arms. The babies in the swaddling clothes were still crying themselves hoarse. Qin Yining was locked in the prison wagon. She had been drowsy, but when she heard the children's cries, she immediately woke up. She turned around abruptly, and her tears fell down, washing the blood on her face and leaving 2 white traces. "Children, my children. Your Majesty, that is the son of a meritorious minister. Pang Shao fought for you outside, but you took his wife and children. Your Majesty, aren't you afraid that the world will be bitterly disappointed?" Li Qitian sneered. Xiong Jinxue immediately understood the emperor's intention. He stood up and reprimanded, "Why aren't you taking her out? Your Majesty is wise and benevolent. He was a wise ruler at that time. How can you slander him as you wish?" Li Qitian looked at Qin Yining's appearance and remembered how powerful this woman was. Perhaps she could even bewitch the people on the streets. Gag her mouth for Zhen. Let's see how she can mislead the people with her lies. Yes. Immediately, someone tore off a piece of cloth, climbed onto the prison wagon and stuffed it into Qin Yining's mouth. Then, they tied a knot behind her head to prevent her from pulling it off. Qin Yining shook his head and could only make sobbing noises. The bloodstains were truly frightening. Li Qitian waved his hand, and the jailer immediately drove the prisoner's carriage out. Li Qitian also arranged for the Gongji guards to line up beside the prisoner's carriage to guard it in case someone tried to kidnap the prisoners. In the silence, only the squeaking of wooden wheels on the snow and the whimpering of Qin Yining in the prison wagon could be heard. After the group of people left, Li Qitian said, "Let's go back to the palace." "Your Majesty." The Minister of Justice strode forward and bowed. "Your Majesty, this princess consort did not do anything wrong. It is too unreasonable to punish her like this. I ask your Majesty to take back the order." "Unreasonable? She just brutally killed someone. Didn't you see the bloodstains on her body? But Prince Zhongshuan's princess consort is of noble birth, and she is also a woman. Moreover, she is being detained by so many people. This official believes that there must be a secret behind the murder." Li Qitian narrowed his eyes and looked at the Minister of Justice. "Su Huayu, I see that your job is getting better and better. You dare to question Zhen's order." Su Huayu was startled. He suppressed the panic in his heart and bowed his head. This official misspoke. "Your Majesty, please forgive this offense." Li Qitian coldly snorted and ordered, "Let's go back to the palace." Xiong Jinxue immediately shouted, "Your Majesty, let's go back to the palace." Everyone bowed and respectfully sent him off. After watching the emperor leave, Su Huayu couldn't help but look worriedly at the tracks left by the prison wagon. At other times, the emperor was happy to be a benevolent ruler. However, when it came to matters related to Prince Zhongshuan, he would become so radical and unreasonable. This was not a good sign. The people in the world were not blind or stupid. There were many people who were sensitive and liked to analyze the politics of the imperial court. If this was made public at this time and it was spread by people with ulterior motives, would the emperor's reputation still be intact? The emperor couldn't understand such a simple reason at this time. Or maybe the emperor understood everything, but he didn't care. Qin Yining was very familiar with the streets of the capital. When she was free, she would take her servant girls to walk around. However, in the cold weather, when the snow was falling, it was the first time for Qin Yining to walk through the streets of the capital in a half-squatting, half-standing position in the prison wagon covered with blood, and the cotton wool on her jacket fell out from the whip. Every time the prison wagon passed a street, the jailer would announce Qin Yining's crime in a clear voice. He only said that she was as vicious as a hungry wolf and used her teeth to bite an official of the court to death. He didn't mention whether the person to die was an official or not, or why she was bitten. He didn't mention the cause and effect. There were Jingji guards around the prison wagon watching, looking for suspicious people in the crowd. When the common people saw that there were people watching, they didn't dare to talk loudly. They only dared to raise their doubts in low voices. Prince Zhongshuan's character is trustworthy. Why is his Wang Fei like this? You don't know, but when Prince Zhongshuan was in disaster relief, Wang Fei helped him a lot. Later on, when Wang Yi was fighting the Tatars on the front lines, Wang Fei was the one who helped with the food. You're just bragging. Ha, don't doubt it. Our family has relatives in Jingang. Previously, Wang Fei was temporarily living in Jingang. She hasn't given birth to a pair of twins with Wang Yi yet. On one hand, she has to give birth, and on the other, she's busy with military pay. How can such a woman kill people for no reason? Maybe there's a secret. Don't talk nonsense. Wang Fei was dragged out to parade through the streets. That was decided by the officials above. Do you not want your heads anymore? Do you want to go to the yamen and be beaten? There were all kinds of discussions and guesses among the common people. There were people who believed that Qin Yining would kill people, but no one believed that she would torture and kill someone for no reason. It didn't matter if the Jingji guards believed it or not. They could only act according to the edict. Your Majesty told them to observe if anyone in the crowd had any thoughts of rebellion, so they observed carefully. They didn't dare to think about anything else. A wild wind blew past, and snowflakes fell down like goose feathers. Originally, it had only been xiao shui, but now it was bone-chilling. The snowflakes were like blades cutting across her face. It was so cold that it hurt. Qin Yining closed her eyes and shrunk her neck involuntarily due to the cold. Her chin immediately touched the cold wooden board of the prison wagon. She laughed self-mockingly, moved her cold and stiff legs, and continued to close her eyes, refusing to see or hear. The snow fluttered in the wind, blocking everyone's vision. Most of the common people had scattered. Only a few people curiously followed the prison carriage, wanting to find out what had happened. Tang Xiu led Ten Jinghu Wei to hide in the crowd. Her eyes were about to crack. Let's charge up and save Wang Fei. Wang Fei is such a noble person. How can she suffer like this? If Wang Yi knew, he would die of heartache. That muddle-headed ruler. He can't get our Wang Yi, so he's venting his anger on Wang Fei. How can he be considered a man? Charge up and save Wang Fei. The Jinghu Wei were all agitated. They wanted to immediately charge up. Tang Xiu calmly shook her head. No, we can't act rashly. If we are caught, we will implicate Wang Yi. We have to listen to Wang Ye's orders. They didn't expect that even though they rushed over, they were still a step too late. The road from the border to the capital was blocked by snow. It was fine if it was a sunny day, but because of the snowstorm, they couldn't tell the direction. That was why they were late. They didn't expect to see this scene when they arrived in the capital. They never expected that Li Qitian would be so despicable as to use a woman as a ploy. Let's ask Wang Yi first. When he needs us, we brothers shouldn't be afraid. Tang Xiu gritted her teeth. We brothers have never been afraid of anyone. Everyone was riled up. They immediately thought of a way to send a letter to Pang Shao. As for Li Qitian, he couldn't help but feel disappointed when he learned that Qin Yining hadn't found any suspicious people when she was parading through the streets. It seems that we still have to wait a while. Li Qitian clicked his tongue twice. If this woman doesn't work, we can only use other methods. Xiong Jinshui stood to the side with his head bowed. When he heard this, he buried his face even lower. The news that Prince Zhongshuan's consort had tortured and killed an official, and that Your Majesty had ordered people to parade her through the streets quickly spread throughout the city. After Qin Yining was paraded through the streets, she was sent back to the Ministry of Justice's prison. When Li Qitian remembered her, he would have people put her in a prison carriage and take her around the city. Whether or not she was paraded through the streets depended on the emperor's mood. Even when the new year was coming, he still didn't let her go. When Pang Xiao received the news, it was the 29th of the 12th lunar month. When he read the secret letter sent by Jing Huwei, his hands trembled so much that he almost couldn't hold the thin piece of paper. Ji Ziyu grabbed Pang Xiao's shoulders and shook him heavily. Calm down. He's trying to lure you back. The imperial edict didn't summon you, so he's using such a despicable method. Pang Xiao's Adam's apple bobbed. After a long time, he nodded and said in a hoarse voice, "Yes. I know." When Ji Ziyu saw him lower his head, there seemed to be a bright reflection in his phoenix-like eyes. He couldn't help but frown. Don't do this. This is a critical moment in the confrontation between the Titan and us. Once we relax, it's very likely that we'll be killed. If we succeed, we can at least drive the Titan back to their desert, so that they won't be able to invade our borders for hundreds of years. You know what's more important. I understand. Pang Xiao gritted his teeth. But I can't watch Sister Eve suffer like this. And my children, they were taken away by the Emperor. I don't know if they're dead or alive. Just by reading this news, Pang Xiao felt like his heart was being twisted by a knife. How scared was his sister Yi? She was a kind-hearted woman. Why would she use such an extreme method to bite someone to death? If she wasn't forced to a dead end, why would she do this? I have to go back and save her. Pang Xiao pursed his lips and paced back and forth. Ji Ziyu pursed his lips. His gloominess was written all over his face. He helplessly put his hands on his hips and looked at Pang Xiao pacing back and forth like a headless fly. Pang Xiao couldn't figure out what to do, so he called Su Weiji and the other strategists over to discuss this matter. Qin Yining had just finished another afternoon of parading through the streets. Her legs were so sore that they were beyond recognition. She was directly dragged back to the prison by the jailers. As soon as she was pushed into the prison cell, a jailer came over with a wooden basin. Before Qin Yining could react, the jailer splashed the water over her head. Hurry up and wash away the stench on her body. I can't stand the stench. In the dead of winter, people could freeze to death in the prison. Qin Yining screamed when a basin of cold water was poured on her head. The cold water flowed down her hair and face, and the blood that had already hardened and turned black flowed down her face and hair. Before she could catch her breath, another basin of cold water was poured over her. Chapter 1149. Princess Consort. Damn it. You can't be so rude to the princess consort. In the prison cell, everyone was shouting angrily. They had watched Qin Yining being abused these past few days, but they had been locked up and could only watch helplessly. Their Wang Fei was a resolute person and had never once complained about it. But they had seen everything that the princess consort had endured. Not to mention that she was just a weak woman, even a man might not be able to endure being locked up in a prison carriage and paraded through the streets in this cold winter. They had been locked up in the prison all day. Even when they were squeezed together, they were still shivering from the cold. The princess consort had been locked up in a cell by herself. Her fox fur coat had already been taken away and she had nothing to warm herself with. Now that she had just come back from parading through the snow, she was directly splashed with cold water. Your Majesty hasn't said what he wants the princess consort to do, but you're doing this. Aren't you afraid that something will happen to the princess consort and you won't be able to explain yourself? Xiaoyu's voice was hoarse from shouting. The jailer laughed loudly, don't say that. We have good intentions. The princess consort has a noble status and a noble personality. Naturally, she can't stand dirt. You must be feeling terrible being covered in blood these past few days, right? Isn't it better to be clean like this? Qin Yining had already become numb from the cold. Just as she touched the water on her face, another basin of cold water was splashed at her. The blood had been washed away, but her clothes were soaked and stuck tightly to her body. Qin Yining couldn't catch her breath. After resting for a while, she struggled to move to the wall. Leaning against the wall, she didn't have any strength left. She closed her eyes and her long, fan-like eyelashes dripped with water as if she was crying. Qin Yining's ears were ringing. She knew that Xiaoyu, Ji Yun, and the others were arguing with the jailer again, but she didn't have time to care about anything else at this time. Right now, every day was torture, but she had to grit her teeth and endure. Thinking that she still had to parade through the streets tomorrow, Qin Yining's heart was filled with fear. It was too cold outside. As a native southerner, she was not used to the harsh winter in the north. Moreover, she did not have any cotton-padded clothes to wear. Her hands and feet were already frostbitten, and the scars from the whipping and the bruises from the stick were all inflamed. She had also been splashed with 3 basins of cold water. At this moment, Qin Yining gritted her teeth and endured the torture. She felt so uncomfortable that she wanted to cry. However, she still gritted her teeth and endured it. Even though her body was trembling like a leaf being blown off by a strong wind, she still held on with her willpower. Because she wasn't sure how the children were doing. Most of the time, Qin Yining was telling herself that she had to persevere, that she had to stop. Only by staying alive would she have a chance to save her child. But now, Qin Yining was trembling all over and his eyes were closed. She was starting to doubt whether she had made the right choice. No matter what Li Qitian wanted to do to her children, there was nothing she could do. She knew that her body wouldn't be able to withstand the torture for long. Perhaps before Pang Zhao's people came to rescue her, she would have already collapsed. She couldn't do anything right now. Even if she lived, she would become a bargaining chip that Li Qitian could use to threaten Pang Zhao. Then why did she continue to persevere? The jailer stood outside the cage. After admiring Qin Yining's miserable state enough, he hummed a tune and walked out with the empty basin. When he arrived outside the prison, he put down the empty basin. The jailer had just picked up the lantern when he saw 2 people walking towards him. The old woman in front was the one who had given him money a few days ago and asked him to take good care of the princess consort. The woman behind her was wearing an embroidered cloak made of sable fur. Her head and face were covered, so he couldn't see clearly. The jailer hurriedly bowed. The old woman in front said, "How is it? How is the princess consort of the Prince Zhongshuan today? In response to your question, everything has been arranged according to your instructions. I just cleaned the princess consort up. She's trembling inside right now." The old woman nodded in satisfaction and turned to look at the luxuriously dressed woman. The jailer tilted his head in confusion. The woman said, "Open the door, I want to go in and take a look." The jailer hurriedly smiled apologetically and explained, "You're making things difficult for this lowly one. Your Majesty's decree says that no one can visit at will. Stop talking nonsense." The woman lifted her hood and sneered, "Seeing this princess, you still won't move aside?" The jailer looked at the woman in front of him with a confused expression. The old woman reprimanded, "This is Anyang, elder princess. How can people like you see her? Why aren't you kneeling down and saluting?" Anyang, elder princess, the only sister of the emperor. Her husband was the Duke of Dingwa. Her background was too big. The jailer knelt down with a plop. He called his brothers who were still talking and laughing when they came out and saluted Lee Heelan together. Lee Heelan looked at the people in front of her with disdain. This princess wants to go in and take a look, is that not allowed? This. Replying to Princess Royal, Prince Zhongshuan's consort is a wanted criminal. Your Majesty didn't give any orders. According to reason, you can't visit her. Presumptuous. Could it be that you're all blind? With this princess here, you dare to stop me? Lee Heelan kicked the jailer's shoulder, making him sit on the ground. The jailer didn't think that the Princess Royal would be such a domineering person. He gave a bitter smile. Thinking about what kind of people were locked up here, they would die sooner or later. The Princess Royal was the only sister of the Emperor and the wife of the Duke of Dingwa. It wasn't worth it for them to offend such a noble person. Moreover, as long as the human trafficker didn't go missing, it was fine. Thinking of this, the jailers respectfully asked the Princess Royal to go in for a visit. Please, it's dark inside. This little one will prepare more lanterns for you. Lee Heelan was satisfied. With the help of Mama Tong, she entered the prison under the dim light. As soon as she entered, a moldy and unpleasant smell hit her in the face, making Lee Heelan frown. What is this smell? Watch your step. Hey, the air in this prison is naturally not good, especially those prisoners. Their bodies are all very dirty. Lee Heelan used her sleeve to cover her nose and mouth. Her brows were knit together as she walked in, not forgetting to look around. Xiaoyu and the others had already heard the commotion and were nervously looking at the people walking outside. Jingzhe and the others had followed Qin Yining for a long time, so they naturally recognized Lee Heelan. It's the Princess Royal of Anyang. Jingzhe whispered into Xiaoyu and the others' ears. Xiaoyu's brows jumped and she nervously stood up again. He had followed Pang Xiao for a long time, so he naturally knew the Princess Royal's feelings towards Pang Xiao. He also knew that the Princess Royal hated the Princess Royal. At this time, he didn't believe that the Princess Royal wasn't here to add insult to injury. Xiaoyu understood, but Ji Yun and Bing Tang understood even more. They nervously stood up and stared at the cell across from them. Princess Royal, it's here. The jailers brought them to the door of Qin Yining's cell, saluted and left. Lee Heelan looked at the curled-up figure in the cell in confusion. Looking at her dirty and wet appearance, where was her previous brilliance? Lee Heelan suddenly began to laugh. Ha, ha. This really is too funny. Qin Yining, even you have a day like this. You deserve it. You deserve it. Lee Heelan laughed in a carefree manner as she slapped her thigh. It was like she hadn't encountered such a good thing in a long time. She was laughing so hard that she couldn't control herself. Bing Tang clenched her fists as tears filled her eyes. Ji Yun really wanted to kill Lee Heelan. Lee Heelan's sharp laughter echoed in the cell, waking Qin Yining from her half-unconscious state. She felt her flesh and blood stiffen as she raised her head with difficulty. She could even hear the sound of her bones cracking. It's you. Her low and gentle voice was hoarse, like it had been rubbed against by sandpaper. Lee Heelan laughed until she was out of breath. How about it? I'm the most considerate towards you, right? I know that you like to be clean, so I specially ordered someone to give you a cold bath. Otherwise, wouldn't you be smelly? Ze, I never would have thought that you would have some skills. You can even use your teeth to bite someone to death. Do you know what others say about you? Lee Heelan grabbed the bars of the cell door and leaned against the cell, saying, You are a savage, a vicious woman with a vicious heart. How could a person like you be worthy of Big Brother Xiao? Qin Yining did not have the strength to argue with Lee Heelan. She knew that she was in dire straits, so it wasn't strange that Lee Heelan was in a rush to see her. She didn't resist and just let her taunt her. Do you admit it? Qin Yining, look at what you look like now. You're just like a stray dog. You're a vicious woman, you jinx your parents, jinx your husband, jinx your children. There isn't anyone by your side that hasn't been jinxed by you, you should have died a long time ago. You're not worthy of Big Brother Xiao at all. Qin Yining was so tired that she couldn't even raise her eyes. She didn't want to pay attention to her, but Lee Heelan mentioned Pang Xiao again. Her heart was suddenly filled with flames that made her suddenly open her eyes. I'm not worthy, but you're worthy. Qin Yining stood up with difficulty and her body swayed a few times. Ji Yun and the others all cried out in shock when they saw this. You are the eldest princess of the dynasty and your husband is the Dinghui Duke, but you're still thinking about someone else's husband. With your personality, are you worthy of being the eldest princess? Quickly go back to your eldest princess palace and don't come out to make a fool of yourself. You're so audacious. Vicious slut, you little slut. Lee Heelan pointed at Qin Yining and began cursing. Qin Yining once again felt that it wasn't interesting. She shook her head and said, in the end, it's just Pang Zhishi looking down on you, so you have a knot in your heart. If you have the skills, then go to the battlefield yourself and find your husband to divorce you. Then you can have your royal brother uphold justice for you and have Pang Zhishi marry you. What's the use of shouting at me here? Pay, bullshit. Lee Heelan's hand with the gold ring and bright red nail polish reached into the cage and scratched Qin Yining's face. But there was still some distance between them. Lee Heelan couldn't take a single hit from Qin Yining. Seeing her in such a sorry state and still talking to her in such a high and mighty manner, Lee Heelan gave a cold laugh. You're so proud of your stubbornness. Let me tell you, your two little brats have already been killed by my royal brother. Their bones have been used to make wine. You're still acting in front of me. Later I'll have my royal brother kill you as well. No, for a slut like you, it's best to throw you into the military camp. I want to see how long you can be so arrogant. Qin Yining's pupils shrank and her body swayed, almost falling down. Chapter 1150. Qin Yining's entire body trembled and she had to support herself against the wall to stand firm. Even if her body was at its limit, she still did not want to show any weakness in front of Lee Heelan. I'll return the same words to you. Qin Yining looked at Lee Heelan with a face full of ridicule. You came to the prison without permission. Your Majesty doesn't know, right? Coming here so rashly, will your Majesty blame you? Not mentioning anything else, the reason why I'm alive right now is because your Majesty needs me to be alive. But you insulting me like this makes me lose all will to live. Tell me, if something happens to me, will your Majesty forgive you? You're threatening me. Lee Heelan's expression suddenly changed. If you want to die, then die. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Of course you're not afraid. Anyway, you're the eldest princess. Whether it is your royal brother or your husband, you don't exist. You're already married and you're still thinking about someone else's husband. If I was the emperor's son-in-law, I would have the heart to kill you. How would I be able to grow old with you? If I were your royal brother, I would have a good marriage with a trusted aide, but my own little sister would ruin it like this. You would think of a way to make a cuckold for your trusted aide, turning the marriage into a grudge. I would also want to kill you to vent my anger. You better pray that I can live until your Majesty needs me, otherwise you won't be far from death. Lee Heelan's entire body trembled as she heard this, but when her eyes met Qin Yining's, she couldn't help looking away. She found that she couldn't look at Qin Yining. Her eyes were too oppressive, making people inexplicably flustered. Once her aura weakened, it would be hard to recover. Lee Heelan also felt bored. She took a step back and wanted to say something to regain her face. Ha! You can only be stubborn for a while. Once royal brother kills your entire family, I'll see if you can still be so proud. After saying this, she turned and left. Qin Yining stared at Li Helan's back. His body swayed, and he fell to the ground, exhausted. Princess Consort, how are you? Ji Yun and Bing Tang asked anxiously. Qin Yining shook his head. I didn't, ah. A blood-curdling scream rang out, cutting off Qin Yining's unfinished words. Everyone jumped in fright and turned to look at the source of the sound, only to see that Li Helan and the old mama who had accompanied her just now had been pierced through by a sword and were lying limply in front of the prison door. Before they could react, several masked men in black rushed in with keys in their hands and opened everyone's prison doors. Who are you people? Qin Yining was dragged out by a man in black. It's me. At this time, he saw a short and stocky Taoist nun with a big smile on her face. She was holding a big red swaddling doll in each hand. Who else could it be other than the Tianjizi? We don't have time to talk nonsense. Let's go. I'm afraid that someone will catch us in a moment. Qin Yining's attention was already attracted by the two swaddling dolls. How could he care about anything else? He was originally very weak, but now he was full of energy and rushed towards the Tianjizi. Jingjie, Xiaoyu, Ji Yun, and the others were also untied. Tianjizi saw Qin Yining's reaction and quickly cooperated by handing her one of the swaddling dolls. You're my child. There's no mistake. She really is. Qin Yining looked at one person and then another. His heart, which had been hanging in the air for many days, finally settled back to its original place. He was so emotional that tears gushed out of his eyes. He trembled as he said, It's true. It's true. Why would I lie to you? Don't delay any longer. Let's go. Tianjizi casually threw the swaddling dolls to Ji Yun, who had rushed to the front. He turned around and led the others to rush out. Xiaoyu and Qin Yining looked at each other and said in a low voice, regardless of whether it's a trap or not, we can't stay here any longer. Qin Yining nodded. Everyone followed suit and rushed out. As soon as they got out of the prison, they saw orange lights flickering in the night sky. They heard people shouting everywhere, it's on fire. The heavenly lightning struck and the palace caught fire. How could this be? How could the palace be struck by heavenly lightning? Qin Yining immediately understood. This must be Tianjizi's plan to divert everyone's attention to the palace's fire. In order to save the emperor, and to gain credit for saving the emperor, most of the manpower would be concentrated in the palace. The group of people ran out silently. Qin Yining ran and checked the swaddling dolls in her arms. Brother Xian was sleeping soundly. He's still not awake after all this trouble. Bing Tang, take a look at the children later. Qin Yining was very worried. Bing Tang nodded. Seeing that Qin Yining was exhausted and stumbling a few times, he hurriedly took the swaddling dolls from her arms. Jingjie and Han immediately carried Qin Yining on each side and walked out. The way out of the Ministry of Justice's prison was very smooth. There were corpses everywhere on the road. Some were stabbed to death, while others were poisoned to death by vomiting black blood. Originally, their group would have left footprints. After all, it had just snowed. However, because of the palace's fire, many people came out to see the commotion. There were also people from the Water Dragon Bureau and the 5 cities' warden's office who anxiously went to rescue the people. The footprints on the ground were even more messy. Their group's footprints could not be seen at all. Tianjizi's people led the way in front, while Qin Yining's group followed behind. They successfully turned a corner on a street and came to a quiet back alley. Tianjizi said, "Hurry up and follow me. We can't leave the city now. I have a house in the city. Let's go to my house first." "Why did you save me?" Qin Yining really did not dare to believe Tianjizi. This person did things unpredictably. In the past, she even tried to kill her and wanted to tear her into pieces. She insisted that her existence was a variable that prevented the Ziwei Emperor star from reaching the top. Now, she came to save people again. Qin Yining was very suspicious of her motives. Did she have some other plan to use again? Tianjizi glared at her fiercely. So much nonsense. Are you going or not? Seeing Qin Yining's sorry state, Tianjizi said again, "If I wanted to kill you and your son, I wouldn't do anything. You won't be able to hold on for more than a few days anyway, right? You're still in the mood to talk nonsense at this time." Qin Yining looked at the people behind him and nodded. No matter what, they had to get through tonight first. They could think about other things at length. The group of people followed behind Tianjizi and took turns to avoid the soldiers they met along the way. Those soldiers were also in a hurry to put out the fire in the direction of the palace and did not care about anything else. They arrived at Tianjizi's house on the outskirts of the city next to the north gate without anyone noticing. "This is the place." Tianjizi pushed open a black wooden door at the end of the alley and waved for everyone to enter. This was a large house with 3 rooms and 2 side rooms. The furnishings in the house were old-fashioned, but there were all kinds of daily necessities. It was obvious that this was an ordinary family. Tianjizi stood in the courtyard with her hands on her hips and panted. She looked at the 20 people behind Qin Yining and then looked at the 10 people behind her. "I'm telling you, I'm not doing this for free. How much is your Wangfei's life worth? There's also your head maidservant, your bodyguards, and my subordinates. Every time they act, they'll need to pay. This residence isn't for you to live in. You'll also need to pay. Also, with so many people eating and drinking, don't expect me to pay for it." Qin Yining was speechless for a moment. She glared at Tianjizi and held back a mouthful of turbid air in her chest, coughing intensely. Bing Tang hurriedly patted Qin Yining's back to calm him down. Xiaoyu said, "Fairy lady, you're right. Fairy lady, you don't have to worry about the reward. My family's Wang Yi will definitely reward you handsomely in the future." Tianjizi chuckled, "Fairy lady. But how long has it been since someone called me fairy lady? Alright, you guys can settle down as you please. If you need anything, come to the main room and find me. You guys can stay here for the night. Tomorrow, I'll check out the situation in the city and think of a way to send you guys out." "Thank you, fairy lady," Xiaoyu bowed sincerely. Jingzhe and the others also bowed in unison with Xiaoyu. Because it was late at night, they didn't dare to speak loudly and remained silent. Tianjizi pointed in Qin Yining's direction, "Look, your family's Wang Ye's subordinates are much more sensible and likable than you. I really don't know why he chose you. It's not like there aren't any girls who are prettier and easier to deal with than you." Qin Yining was so angry that he coughed even more violently. His vision turned black. The string that he had been clenching his teeth and persevering in the prison finally snapped. His body went limp and he fell to the ground, unconscious. Princess consort, princess consort. Everyone was in a mess. Some people were saving people, while others were boiling water. Tianjizi looked at these people with his hands on his hips. The smile on his face gradually faded. He snorted coldly and returned to the main room. Qin Yining had a high fever that night. When Bing Tang and Ji Yun helped her clean and change her clothes, they found that the whip wounds on her body were showing signs of suppuration. The frostbite on her hands and feet was even more serious. The 2 servant girls were so distressed that they shed tears. They cursed Li Qitian in their hearts. They even wished that there would be a fire in the palace today and burn that incapable ruler to death. Qin Yining felt like she was a fat sheep that was being roasted on a stick. Her body was so hot that it was beyond recognition. People would often flip her over and rub some unknown seasoning on her body. She really wanted to tell these people that she wasn't a sheep and that they shouldn't eat her. But no matter how much strength she had, she couldn't even lift her thin eyelids. Princess Consort's fever hasn't subsided. What should we do? Ji Yun changed a cold handkerchief for Qin Yining and used her sleeve to wipe her tears. Princess Consort has suffered so much. She hasn't eaten a full meal, hasn't had a good night's sleep, and has been put in a prisoner carriage and paraded through the streets every day. She has been humiliated by people. That incapable ruler deserves to be stabbed 1,000 times. He even stole Princess Consort's child. All right. Princess Consort will be fine. Aren't the young master and young miss also fine? Don't cry here. You're in the way. Bing Tang pushed Qin Yining aside and took out a cloth bag from her sleeve. Inside was a row of silver needles. I'll help Princess Consort reduce her fever first. Everything else can be discussed. Ji Yun sniffled and nodded. Then I'll go take a look at the young master and young miss. Everyone was so busy that they were thrown off their feet, but they didn't dare to make any noise to attract attention. At the same time, the patrolling soldiers of the 5 cities' warden's office finally discovered the abnormality in the Ministry of Justice's prison. They stepped over the disorderly corpses and saw that the ground was covered in blood. The cells that held the other felons were still intact, but the cells that held Prince Zhongshuan's consort and her entourage were open. What was even more shocking was that the corpses of the Princess Royal and the female officials from the Princess Royal's residence were lying in the prison. Chapter 1151. The fire in the palace was gradually brought under control in the early morning, but it was not completely extinguished immediately. Fortunately, the important palace rooms were not affected. In addition, the Empress Dowager, Empress, and concubines evacuated in time. Except for some palace servants who were slightly burned, there were no casualties. However, the fire had spread to his own home. Li Qitian was worried for the whole night, and his depression finally turned into anger. Sitting in Yangxin Hall, Li Qitian's eyes were blue and he looked tired. He scolded harshly, "A bunch of trash. What use do I have for you?" The palace guards and officials who hurried over knelt on the ground. Everyone was covered in dirt. They could only put their foreheads on the ground and beg for forgiveness. "Your Majesty, please calm down. We are guilty." "Of course you are guilty. This is such a big palace. How many guards do I have? The new year is coming, but you let this happen at the beginning of the year. Aren't you afraid that there will be foolish people outside who will say I am wrong?" Fortunately, the Empress Dowager and Empress were not hurt. "If they were hurt, how will you compensate? Even if I cut off your heads, you won't be able to compensate. Your Majesty, please calm down." Everyone kowtowed again. At this time, the news of the incident in the prison of the Ministry of Justice came back. Li Qitian immediately widened his eyes. Impossible. Suddenly standing up, Li Qitian still had a look of disbelief. Why would An Yang go to the prison of the Ministry of Justice? Why would she go to the prison of the Ministry of Justice instead of staying in the Princess Mansion? Replying to Your Majesty, this is true. The eunuch who replied was so frightened by the emperor's anger that he trembled and his voice trembled. Princess Royal of Anyang went out with her nanny. She didn't go back last night. The steward of the Princess Royal Mansion didn't dare to say anything and hurriedly ordered people to look for her. However, they didn't find her here, but the prison of the Ministry of Justice was found. The other prisoners were all fine. Only the prison of Prince Zhongshuan's concubine was intercepted. 4 jailers were killed. Including the Princess Royal and her nanny, 6 people died. Li Qitian stood in place and didn't say anything for a long time. Li Helan is dead. The sister that he used to dote on, but later annoyed, was dead. Moreover, he had died in prison, his heart pierced by a knife. How could his sister, Li Qitian, encounter such a thing? He was the son of heaven. He was already the most respected person in Dezhou. Why couldn't he protect his sister? Even if this little sister of his had become annoying and the things she did made him feel embarrassed, she was still his biological little sister. Without his order, who would dare to kill her? Bastard! Revolt, revolt! With a flick of his sleeve, Li Qitian pushed the table full of brushes, ink, cups, and plates to the ground. The sound of broken porcelain made everyone tremble. The eunuchs were so scared that they knelt down and kowtowed one after another, not caring that the broken porcelain would cut into their flesh. Li Qitian furiously kicked over the white porcelain vase on the 3-legged high table, panting angrily like a mad lion. Who dares to say that Pang Xiao doesn't have any rebellious intentions? He sent people to break the prison and kidnapped Anyang from the eldest princess palace. He even tried to assassinate this one's only sister. What kind of intentions he has are already clear. Your Majesty, please calm your anger. The officials kowtowed again. Everyone present had some doubts in their hearts. Why did the eldest princess of Anyang go to the Ministry of Justice's prison? Was she so important that she would be assassinated? Moreover, they had all seen the humiliation that Prince Zhongshuan's consort had suffered these days. Everyone couldn't bear it. Prince Zhongshuan was outside fighting against the Titan, but the emperor was here abusing Wang Ye's wife. This wasn't anything glorious to begin with. Now that the princess had been saved, this should have been expected, right? If it was said that the eldest princess of Anyang was killed because of the prison break, they would believe it. However, if it was said that Prince Zhongshuan's people deliberately kidnapped the eldest princess and sent her to prison, then killed her in front of the princess to save the princess, this was not acceptable. However, the emperor's words just now had this meaning, therefore, he had made up his mind to break with Wang Yi. He even planned to push the blame of the eldest princess of Anyang's death onto Wang Yi. No one present was stupid and no one dared to question him. However, everyone understood that Your Majesty didn't allow Wang Yi to enter the city when he led the troops to save the emperor. Then he changed the commander after driving out the Titan, and then he kidnapped Wang Ye's family and humiliated them. All of this came from one reason, fear. Throwing away the bow after the birds and cooking the hounds after the hares. This was nothing new. In his anger, Li Qitian stripped the officials of their positions. The news of the eldest princess of Anyang being assassinated spread through the court. The Empress Dowager fainted on the spot from crying. She grabbed Li Qitian's hand and said, "Take revenge for Lan, you must take revenge for Lan, Have the emperor's son-in-law kill that evil creature Pang Zhishi." Li Qitian originally had an impatient expression, but his expression suddenly changed. That's right. Even if Ji Ziyu didn't like Anyang very much, she was still his wife. His wife was killed by Pang Zhao's people. Would Ji Ziyu, with his fiery temper, let go of Pang Zhao? He wanted to make Pang Zhao betray him. Li Qitian immediately ordered people to spread the news to the border. At the same time, he announced to the world that Prince Zhongshuan had been impeached for 10 major crimes, as well as the crime of disobeying the imperial edict. This time, not only did he break into the prison, but he also assassinated the eldest princess. At the same time, the people in the capital were doomed to have a bad new year. This was because Li Qitian had arranged for people to search for the whereabouts of Prince Zhongshuan's concubine in the capital. At this time, Qin Yining had just taken a dose of medicine and was leaning against the pillow in a daze. Her clothes were half taken off and she let Ji-yoon put a warm handkerchief under the blanket to wipe her body. She was listening to Bing Tang talk about the situation outside. So, Tian Jizi's actions completely broke the window paper between Wang Yi and the present emperor. Qin Yining sighed. Actually, the eldest princess didn't have to die at that time. She deserved to die. Bing Tang snorted coldly. That woman was too vicious. Not only did she repeatedly covet Wang Yi, but she also slandered you and thought of ways to torture you. This kind of person deserved to die. Qin Yining shook her head. Her pale and thin face was dyed with an abnormal flush. She said weakly and hoarsely, no matter if she deserved to die or not, killing her now will only lead to an earlier break between the emperor and Wang Yi. It might even give the emperor a way to convict Wang Yi. Tian Jizi really can't wait for Wang Yi and the emperor to have a showdown. Now that the capital was under martial law and people were searching for her, this fugitive, Qin Yining couldn't help but think that if Tian Jizi didn't kill Li Helan and only knocked her out, perhaps the situation wouldn't be as tense as it was now. But it didn't make a difference. Li Helan was just a bargaining chip. Even if she didn't die, Li Qitian still wouldn't let go of the crime of jailbreaking. In this era, didn't the emperor have to do whatever he said? If the emperor said that there was something wrong, who would dare to say no? Alright, Wang Fei, don't think too much. Right now, no matter what Tian Jizi thinks, you just need to take care of your body. This time, we were all caught together. We were all fine, but you were the only one covered in injuries. Bing Tang's voice was choked with sobs as she spoke. Qin Yining had never been hurt, suffered, and humiliated for so many years. She had tasted all the pain, suffering, and humiliation she had never suffered before. They were locked up in prison all day and couldn't stand the cold. But Wang Fei was placed in a prison carriage that couldn't even stand or squat. She was paraded through the streets in the heavy snow. She was a woman from a prestigious family, but she had to be pointed at by a group of people. If she was a narrow-minded person, she might have already been humiliated. I'll just take care of myself. Qin Yining saw that the two maidservants were about to cry again and hurriedly comforted them softly. Aren't I also fine? It's just some superficial wounds. You're still saying that you're fine. The whip wounds on your body will probably leave scars. There's also the frostbite on your hands and feet. If you don't treat it well, you'll get sick every year. Wang Fei, you're of noble birth and have never suffered like this. Sometimes, this servant really wishes that you didn't marry Wang Yi back then. If you married an ordinary peddler, with your wisdom, you could have lived a prosperous life as a rich family's madam. But now... Bing Tang's heart ached as she wiped her face with her sleeve, but her tears didn't listen to her and fell. Although Ji Yun was given to Qin Yining by Pang Shao, she had followed Qin Yining for so many years and was loyal to him. At this time, when she thought about Bing Tang's words, she felt that it was reasonable and nodded repeatedly. Wang Fei is such a good woman. You can live a good life if you marry anyone. Why do you have to be so miserable? Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh when he saw the two maidservants' appearance. Although he was weak, he still had a hint of a smile. You too, if Wang Yi hears what you said, he will be very sad. Ji Yun immediately thought of Jinghu Wei, who was standing outside the door, arranged by Wang Yi. But she still didn't care. Even if Wang Yi is in front of me, I still dare to say this. Marrying His Highness, although he is devoted to you, he has also brought you so much suffering and trouble. Perhaps devotion is really precious. But with your talent and appearance, no matter who you marry, he will be so good to you, right? Sometimes I think that Wang Yi is just too selfish. All right. Qin Yining patted the back of Ji Yun's hand. How can there be so many ifs in the world? Relationships are not a transaction, and it's not like you have to get the same amount of return after giving something. If I give something in hopes of getting something in return, then wouldn't it be a transaction? Ji Yun and Bing Tang both sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Qin Yining from left and right. Qin Yining took a deep breath and said slowly, "Moreover, I also know that the life I have now is because of his hard work. Perhaps other peddlers can give me more stability, but when you get something, don't you have to look at how much effort the person who gave it to you has put into exchange for it?" With Wang Ye's status, a stable life is easy for ordinary people to get, but to Wang Yi, he has to do his best to give it to me. I know that he has already worked very hard. When Bing Tang and Ji Yun heard this, they were momentarily moved. Chapter 1152. Xia Yu turned and walked towards his room. Liao Zhibing and Master Zhou were talking in a low voice in the corridor. Seeing Xia Yu walk over, they smiled and asked in a low voice, "Does Sir Xia have something to discuss with Wang Fei?" Xia Yu smiled and said, "Wang Fei's body has not fully recovered. It is better to let Wang Fei rest." Liao Zhibing and Master Zhou both nodded. They were already on the verge of collapse after being starved and frozen in prison. Wang Fei, on the other hand, had been humiliated and suffered so much. She had even been paraded through the streets. They really didn't know how they would explain it to Wang Yi if it was someone with a weaker personality who wanted to commit suicide. But Wang Fei had been very calm from beginning to end. It was as though those scars and humiliation were not on her body. Xia Yu was an old man by Wang Ye's side. Naturally, he was loyal to Wang Yi. But he felt that there were some things that Wang Fei had hidden from him. If he didn't say it, then Wang Yi would never know how much suffering Wang Fei had suffered in a place that he didn't know. All of this suffering was given by His Majesty. Their children had almost been killed. Xia Yu and Su Weiji were Wang Ye's trusted aides. They more or less knew that Wang Yi had hidden some trump cards. They did not feel that they had been deceived. Instead, they were happy to see Wang Ye's actions. At least he did not blindly open his heart. It was not a bad thing to be on guard against others. Also, Wang Yi had always trusted them. Other than some things that were hidden from him, Pang Xiao had always trusted them and let them do anything. What's more, they admired people like His Highness who cared about the world. Therefore, it wasn't a big deal for His Highness to be on guard against family matters. Indeed, Xia Yu and Su Weiji had discussed this many times in private. They knew that a person as talented as Qin Huayuan would not easily walk to a dead end. Right now, he might have already arranged a path of retreat. They were both intelligent and observant. From Wang Ye's daily conversations, they had already discovered Wang Ye's attitude on the matter of having children. But no matter what, this time, Li Qitian had indeed stolen the twins. He wanted to use them as a hostage and possibly even kill them. Xia Yu wrote furiously and explained the situation in a concise manner. He resisted the urge to add his own opinion and judgment. He rolled up the paper, sealed it with wax, and handed it to Jinghu Wei beside him. While the city is not very strict, quickly use a messenger pigeon to send the letter out. Yes. Jinghu Wei immediately nodded in acknowledgement. Xia Yu was worried that in a few days they would not even be able to send a messenger pigeon out. If Li Qitian wanted to search carefully, they were afraid that they would not be able to stay in their current hiding place for long. What's more, they couldn't be sure if this Tianji was completely trustworthy or not, and whether he would sell Princess Consort out, but Tianji lived peacefully in the main room. All day long, she happily ate fish and meat. When she had nothing to do, she would ask her subordinates to buy her wine. Sometimes, she would grab a pig's leg and leisurely nibble on it in front of the porch. She would not forget to stretch her neck to look at Qin Yining's room or tease the twins. Qin Yining was recuperating, but Tianji was so leisurely. In the eyes of Xia Yu and the others, it was very unpleasant to look at. Qin Yining's condition was slowly improving. But if he wanted to fully recover, it would take at least 10 days to half a month. After another 3 days, Qin Yining's fever finally subsided. He no longer had a high fever. This made everyone sigh in relief. Bing Tang began to prepare some nourishing meals to feed her. Where are Xian Gu and Yunjia? Wang Fei, don't worry. The wet nurse is taking care of them. The children are very well. Do you want me to bring the children over for you to take a look? Qin Yining shook her head. She pressed her pale lips until there was a bit of color. The children are still young. It's cold outside. Don't let the illness affect them. The wet nurse can take care of them. Bing Tang smiled and said, Don't worry, Wang Fei. The wet nurse has taken good care of Little Master and Little Miss these days. When the twins were snatched away, the wet nurse was so regretful that she almost died. She blamed herself for letting Wang Fei down and not being able to protect the children. Qin Yining swallowed a mouthful of soup and couldn't help but smile. It wasn't their fault. In that situation, could they have stolen the emperor? Wang Fei is so open-minded. You never take your anger out on others. What's there to take your anger out on? It wasn't their fault in the first place. You're drinking soup. It smells so good. Just as they were talking, Tian Jizi's voice suddenly came from the door. Qin Yining looked up and saw Tian Jizi walk in while gnawing on a roasted chicken leg. She didn't care about the oil on her cheeks. She sat down on the stool diagonally across from her and smiled. How is it? Does your complexion look better? Qin Yining smiled. It's all right. I still have to thank you for saving my life this time. Don't thank me. Tian Jizi shook her head and took another bite of the chicken leg. She tore off a large piece of meat and chewed as she said, I didn't have a choice. Do you think I wanted to save you? Qin Yining narrowed her eyes and smiled. I remember that in the past, Xian Gu couldn't wait for me to die an unnatural death. If I died in prison this time, wouldn't it arouse Wang Ye's hatred for the emperor? Xian Gu could have achieved her goal by letting me fend for myself. Why would she save me? Tian Jizi raised her eyebrows. It seems that you still have some self-awareness. Bing Tang and Ji Yun frowned unhappily. They didn't like the way Tian Jizi spoke. But when Qin Yining glanced at them indifferently, the two of them knew that Wang Fei didn't want them to speak. Xian Gu has always been clear about gratitude and grudges. I know this in my heart. Qin Yining smiled. If Xian Gu had the chance, she would want to take my life several times. So when Xian Gu saved me this time, I was really surprised. You don't have to be surprised. Tian Jizi began to gnaw on the chicken leg. Her cheeks were swollen from chewing. I never did it for you. Don't think too highly of yourself. Oh. I'd like to hear the details. I did it for the Ziwei Emperor star. In the past, your existence was his stumbling block. Without you, the Ziwei Emperor star would be able to reach that position faster. So I wanted to kill you. But now, if you die, the Ziwei Emperor star won't be able to reach that position. I had no choice but to save you. Qin Yining was stunned for a moment. What did Tian Jizi mean? The Ziwei Emperor star was naturally referring to Pang Shao. From her point of view, Pang Shao didn't want to be the emperor because of her. Now, Pang Shao wanted to be the emperor because of her. No. Just as Tian Jizi said, she didn't need to think so highly of herself. But if Tian Jizi's words were translated, that was indeed what she meant. Moreover, if Pang Shao really wanted to be the emperor, other than for the sake of the people, perhaps he really did want to give her a stable and worry-free life. In this world, whose woman didn't have to worry about being coveted and humiliated? In Pang Zhao's opinion, it had to be the most honorable one. Tian Jizi saw Qin Yining's dazed expression and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Your existence is the biggest variable. I've calculated countless times in my life, and I've calculated many people, but I can't figure you out. Whenever something happens to you, it's bound to cause a change. Tian Jizi casually threw the chewed chicken leg bone on the ground and casually wiped her hands on her robe. Come on, you should also prepare yourself. We'll think of a way to get out of the city in these 2 days. If we give you more time to recuperate, you won't be able to get out. Qin Yining couldn't help but sit up straight. You mean, I don't need to say it? You already know. Your Majesty ordered people to search the city, and it will only get stricter and stricter. If I had said that you were trouble, it would have been easier for us to leave earlier. However, you were sick and couldn't get out of bed. I was also afraid that something would happen to you halfway through saving you, so I could only give you time to recuperate. Now that you're awake, you can at least run for a while. We can't afford to delay any longer. Tian Jizi stood up and walked out casually. You should prepare well. Tomorrow evening, before the city gates are locked, the defense will be weaker. We'll leave then. Looking at Tian Jizi's back, Qin Yining smiled. Got it. No matter what, I still have to thank you. Tian Jizi waved her hand, as if she couldn't be bothered with Qin Yining. She swaggered out. Seeing that Tian Jizi had arrived, Bing Tang and Ji Yun came to serve Qin Yining to finish the rest of the tonic soup and medicine. Ji Yun muttered in a low voice, this person's words are too boring. It's as if he'll lose a piece of flesh if he doesn't say a few unpleasant words when he sees the princess consort. Qin Yining shook his head. Everyone has their own standpoints. One thing is another. She helped me this time. When I return, I have to think of a way to repay her. Bing Tang took out a few silver needles. Give the princess consort a few more needles to strengthen her body. We'll be ready to leave tomorrow. Qin Yining cooperated and was pricked until he looked like a hedgehog. The night passed peacefully. The next day, everyone in the residence started to busily and calmly prepare to leave the city. Just in case, Xiaoyu didn't hide his ability to disguise himself. He used the limited materials he had to disguise Qin Yining as a sickly young master. Ji Yun and Bing Tang were dressed as two beautiful concubines. The rest of the people were more or less in disguise. They had to deliberately change the way they walked. They weren't allowed to speak when it wasn't necessary. It was hard to tell that these people were all around Qin Yining. Tian Jizi wore a khaki-colored cotton jacket and skirt. She was dressed like an old maid in a large residence. We're accompanying the young master, the little young master, and the two beautiful concubines who just gave birth to children back to our hometown in the north. Remember, don't let your mouth slip. Just say that Tayton has been chased away. We're leaving our relatives' home and returning home. Got it. Ji Yun and Bing Tang became the beautiful concubines. Zhao Gu'er and Yunjia became their children. Qin Yining was a sickly young master dressed luxuriously. Chapter 1153. The sickly young master, Qin Yining, had a thin disguise on his face. His appearance was ordinary, and he was extremely thin. He looked no different from those rich young masters who were used to drinking wine and meat. Ji Yun and Bing Tang were also dressed in very gaudy clothes. They also had hair accessories and makeup done for married women. They looked like Qin Yining, and they were really two beautiful concubines who used their looks to attract favor. Jing Zhe, Jing Hu Wei, and the others were all dressed up as workers. Liao Zhibing and Master Zhong were the two old masters of the family. The carriage in front carried the master, and the handcart in the back carried the family's belongings. The group of people swaggered all the way to the city gate. For the past 2 days, the city had been under martial law. Li Qitian had ordered the capture of the Wangfei, so the guards at the city gate were especially vigilant. When they saw such a long group coming, they immediately surrounded them and stopped them. "Stop, what are you doing? Why are you leaving the city at this time?" Tian Jizi immediately jumped down from the handcart in the back and jogged to the front. She smiled and said, Official, we are going back to our hometown in the north. This is the document." As she spoke, she took out the official seal. The seal clearly stated the origin of this group of people, the number of people, and the number of horses. Seeing that the seal was complete, the guards at the city gate turned to check the people in the carriage. Qin Yining was leaning on the carriage, hugging 2 beautiful concubines, and whispering sweet nothings to each other. The dark blue cotton curtain was lifted, scaring him into raising his head. "Hey, what are you doing?" Ji Yun glared and spoke in an authentic northern dialect, playing the role of a domineering beautiful concubine to the fullest. The guards at the city gate carefully checked Qin Yining and found that this young master had an Adam's apple and his face was very ordinary. When they looked at the 2 beautiful concubines, they half believed him. However, when they saw the 2 babies in the car, they became suspicious again. The Tian Jizi hurriedly came over and said, "Official, our young master was born with a weak body, and it has always been difficult for him to have children. Old master made the decision to take in more than 20 concubines for the young master, and only then did he have 2 children who can stand up, and they are both daughters. Official, please do us a favor, we are in a hurry to leave the city and go to the neighboring town in the north to stay overnight. Otherwise, we will have to sleep in the wilderness in this snowy day." They were all daughters. The city gate official asked the wet nurse to open the swaddling clothes for inspection. Qin Yining clenched his fists nervously. But when he opened the swaddling clothes, there were indeed 2 girls. She didn't know how Xiaoyu did it, but Brother Xian didn't see any flaws. Only then did the guards completely believe. Even if Wang Fei wanted to disguise herself and escape, she wouldn't abandon her children. Prince Zhongshuan had 1 son and 1 daughter, not 2 daughters. The Tian Jizi casually stuffed a piece of silver into the hands of the guards. "The weather is cold and the ground is frozen. Official, buy some wine to eat." The guards naturally wouldn't be polite to the Tian Jizi. In the end, they tossed the silver and returned the travel permit to the Tian Jizi. "All right, you can go." "Oh, thank you, official." The Tian Jizi immediately sat back in the carriage, and the group of people swaggered out of the city gate. They directly braved the wind and snow and rushed towards the north. It wasn't until the northern city gate was hidden in the wind and snow and could no longer be seen clearly that everyone's tense nerves quietly relaxed. The hands of Jingzhe and the other imperial bodyguards slowly moved away from the bags and straw mats where they hid their weapons. Qin Yining hurriedly checked the swaddling clothes and found that Xiaoyu had made something like a human skin mask and stuck it on Brother Xian's body. Actually, from a different angle, he could see some clues. However, it was just as the Tian Jizi said. At this time, the guards were at their most impatient. They didn't have the patience to look carefully, so naturally, they didn't see anything strange. Qin Yining couldn't help but chuckle. "I didn't expect Sir Xia to even change the child's gender." The Tian Jizi sitting outside the carriage snorted, "Isn't it all thanks to this Xian Gu?" Qin Yining smiled and said, "Yes, it's all thanks to Xian Gu." The Tian Jizi smiled proudly. As they gradually left the city gate, the night gradually fell. They planned to spend the night in Lujia village outside the city. The group of people walked and took carriages. Their speed didn't decrease at all. Leaving the capital, everyone's hearts were very light. Qin Yining leaned against the soft pillow and took a nap. As the carriage moved, his breathing gradually slowed down. Seeing that Qin Yining had fallen asleep, Bing Tang and Ji Yun didn't speak anymore. They quietly coaxed the child. When the wheels rolled over the snow, they made creaking sounds, making the surrounding atmosphere even more peaceful. The Tianjizi took out an oiled paper bag from her arms and opened it. Inside were pancakes and smoked meat. She grabbed one and started eating. The coachman was one of the Jinghu Wei. These days, he could see the Tianjizi eating anywhere and anytime. He couldn't help but smile and say, "Your appetite is really good." The Tianjizi chewed on the pancake and said vaguely, "In life, eating and drinking are two words. If you have the time and the opportunity to eat, you should eat well." The Jinghu Wei found it funny and nodded repeatedly, "You're right." The Tianjizi ate 2 pancakes and burped. When she reached out to grab the third one, Jingzha's voice suddenly came from the cart at the back of the group. "No, there seems to be the sound of horse hooves." Everyone's heart skipped a beat. They quickly stopped the carriage and held their breaths to listen carefully. Qin Yining was also awakened by the shaking when the carriage stopped. He looked up at Ji Yun and Bing Tang. Before he could speak, he vaguely heard the sound of horse hooves trampling on the snow. The Tianjizi's expression was grim. She stopped eating the pancakes and pointed to the forest by the road and said, "Quick, go into the forest. It's the pursuers. Hide well if you need to, and hide if you can resist the enemy's ambush." Everyone immediately moved. No one doubted the accuracy of the Tianjizi's command. The situation was critical. It was obvious that the guards in front of the city gate had noticed something suspicious about them and chased after them. Qin Yining, the wet nurse carrying the child, Master Zhong, and Xiaoyu were surrounded by the crowd and retreated into the forest. The Tianjizi squatted beside Qin Yining and commanded the dozen people she brought along to fight with Jinghu Wei. Soon, the night sky lit up with flashes of light. The torches formed a line and gradually approached. There were more than 50 people. "The carriage is here. There are footprints on the ground. They must not have gone far. They must be hiding in the forest. Search. Search carefully." The pursuers were all from the Jingji Guards camp. Originally, they did not know the direction of Qin Yining's group. However, when they passed by the city gate and asked, they heard that there were 2 children in the carriage. Even if the guards said that they were 2 girls, they were still determined. They would rather kill the wrong person than let them go, so they chased after them. They did not expect to see an abandoned carriage here. There was also a forest beside it. They naturally guessed it. Qin Yining's heart was in her throat. She was afraid that the 2 children would cry and attract the attention of the pursuers. At this moment, there was a sudden scream. Jinghu Wei, the spies, and the people from the Qing-Tian alliance, as well as the people brought by Tianjizi, were already facing the Jingji guards. Qin Yining held her breath and stared at the situation outside with her eyes wide open. Other than Ji Yun, who knew martial arts, the rest were ordinary people. The 2 wet nurses were still holding 2 swaddling clothes. She did not know if the children would suddenly cry out of fear. Xiaoyu and Master Zhong looked at the situation outside and stamped their feet anxiously. "What should we do?" Master Zhong lowered his voice. "The other party has many people. We may not be their match." Tianjizi also said in a low voice, "We have to fight now even if we don't want to. If we don't fight, we will die. Our people will fight with their lives. The difference in numbers is not big. Plus, we have different ideas. I think we can win." Qin Yining nodded. "Xian Gu is right. Let's not panic. We just need to wait and see." The sounds of fighting and killing reverberated through the entire open field. The snow-covered trees were shaken to the point that snowflakes rustled and fell down. There was even a slight echo from the distant mountains. Qin Yining worriedly reminded the wet nurse behind her, "Cover the boy's ears." But as soon as he finished speaking, Brother Xian opened his big round eyes that were like black grapes and looked around curiously. The wet nurse's body stiffened. Qin Yining hurriedly patted the swaddling clothes and hummed a few words to comfort them. The boys seemed to feel safe. They smacked their lips and closed their eyes again. They fell asleep in the wet nurse's arms. Qin Yining quietly heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, Jingzhe and the others were fighting with all their might. They knew that they could not retreat even half a step. Once they retreated, not only would they die, but the princess consort and the others who were protecting them would also die. They had experienced the feeling of helplessness in the prison. They could only watch as the princess consort was taken out. The feeling of being unable to save her was too despairing. Right now, they only wanted to protect the princess consort, the young master, and the young miss. They could not let Qin Yining be in danger again. Therefore, they were all fighting with all their strength. What surprised them was that the men brought by Tianjizi were all highly skilled in martial arts. They were on par with Jinghu Wei. Everyone worked together and were evenly matched with the Jingji guards. They successfully stopped this group of people. However, Tianjizi was not optimistic. She twisted her short and fat fingers and frowned. "There are still pursuers. We have to leave quickly." Qin Yining looked at Tianjizi questioningly. Tianjizi grabbed Qin Yining's arm and headed southeast. "This is the gate of life." Xiaoyu, Master Zhong, and the others hesitated for a moment before following. Ji Yun and Bing Tang protected the two wet nurses by their sides. They ran southwest through the forest and through the snow. However, they had not run more than 200 feet when they saw the light of a fire approaching from outside the forest. It was indeed another group of people on horses. There were more than 20 men on horses and they all had bows in their hands. Ji Yun turned around to take a look. She was so scared that her face turned pale. She said in a low voice, "They have bows." Tianjizi urged, "Hurry, hurry. The direction is southwest. There's a gate of life. Hurry." "What about Jingzhe and the others?" Qin Yining turned around as he ran. However, Qin Yining grabbed his wrist and pulled him forward. Chapter 1154. Qin Yining didn't know why Tianjizi said that, but the hand that was gripping her wrist was so tight that it seemed like it was going to squeeze her flesh and bones apart. It was enough to see how nervous Tianjizi was at this moment. Qin Yining was skeptical about Tianjizi's prediction, but Tianjizi did indeed have some abilities that ordinary people didn't have. Some of the things that he did were unimaginable. She couldn't say that those were all coincidences. Besides, Tianjizi was saving her life right now. She quickened her steps and used all her strength to run after Tianjizi. However, although her body was better these days, her physical strength was still not as good as before. In just a moment, she was panting like a cow and seeing stars. Whoosh, bang. She heard the sound of something breaking through the air. When she turned around, she saw a feathered arrow stuck in the tree beside her. It actually almost hit her. Not daring to delay, Qin Yining hurriedly urged Bing Tang and Ji Yun, "Hurry, hurry, hurry, you two protect Gu, and Jia, If you can run quickly, run quickly." Princess Consort. Ji Yun wanted to turn around and pull Qin Yining, but Qin Yining said, "Hurry, this is an order. You two protect the children." Ji Yun pulled out the soft sword that was coiled around her waist. With a flash of cold light, she used all her strength to cut off an arrow. She nodded heavily and chased after the wet nurse. Xiaoyu and Master Zhong were old. They were panting from running, but Qin Yining wasn't willing to give up on them. Tianjizi gritted his teeth and spat, "You're in the way. Hurry and find a place to hide." The few of them slipped. The forest was covered in snow, and there was a thick layer of withered leaves. They slid down the steep slope just like that. The wet nurse cried out in alarm, and the two children burst into tears. Qin Yining's heart trembled. She heard the pursuers shouting loudly, "Over there! Chase! No, we can't go in the same direction. Protect the children and go in the southeast direction." Qin Yining lowered her voice and instructed the people who fell with her. "I'll go in the other direction. They want to catch me alive." Tianjizi said angrily, "You're courting death. Don't forget, you killed Li Helan. Li Qitian is going to catch you to vent his anger. You'll die if you go out. If those two brats are captured, they might still have a chance to live." "No. Those are my children. You to be stubborn." The distant footsteps of the Jiangyi guards gradually approached, and the divine predictor's forehead was covered in sweat. Qin Ido Jizi. Turning to S to T. Master Zhong's eyes widened. He wanted to shout, but he was afraid of attracting attention. He could only clench his fists. Ji Yun and Bing Tang covered the children's mouths. Their hands were covered in the children's tears, but they had to be careful not to suffocate the children. Watching Qin Yining run away, their hearts were filled with despair and sadness. They had escaped with great difficulty. Could it be that they couldn't escape this disaster? Tianjizi wiped her face. "Damn, I really owe her." She turned her head abruptly and told Xiaoyu, "Go southeast for about 500 feet. You'll see a towering ancient tree. Walk in the direction where the branches are denser. You'll see a tree hole hidden in the snow. You guys hide in there." She then said to Bing Tang, "Give these two children a shot. Don't let them make a sound." Everyone's faces were solemn, and they did not immediately respond. Tianjizi's reputation was too widespread. Naturally, everyone knew that she was capable. However, she had always been treacherous. For a moment, they didn't know whether they should believe her or not. Tianjizi's penetrating gaze swept across everyone. She sneered, "It's up to you. If you don't believe me, you can just walk around and die." After saying that, she turned and chased after Qin Yining. Ji Yun and Bing Tang looked at Xiaoyu inquisitively. "Mr. Xia, what should we do?" Xiaoyu looked in the direction Tianjizi ran. In the darkness, she could see the orange light of the torch on the slope. Her heart trembled. She whispered, "There's no other way now. Listen to him. Let's go." The few of them nodded. They protected the wet nurse and followed Tianjizi's route. At this time, Qin Yining had already taken a detour and climbed up the slope. She hid among the dead branches and broken trees. Not far away, she saw a chaotic battle. Jingzhe, Jinghu Wei, and the others were fighting and retreating. There weren't many soldiers left in the first group. However, the 20 soldiers in the second group were all carrying bows and arrows. At this time, some of them were searching in the forest, while others were shooting arrows. It was difficult to determine the winner. Footprints in the winter were the hardest to hide. Qin Yining was worried that the soldiers would chase in the direction of the children. She had no choice but to run in the opposite direction. She didn't care when she accidentally stepped on a dead branch. Although the sound was very faint because of the chaotic battle in the forest, there were still some soldiers carrying bows and arrows who discovered her. "Over there. Chase after her." 7 or 8 soldiers carrying bows and arrows were immediately attracted by Qin Yining. They chased after her. When Qin Yining saw that the enemy had taken the bait, she immediately used all her strength to run. She used the winding and complicated terrain of the forest to turn left and right to avoid the arrows. Oh no, the princess consort has been discovered. Jingzhi had also discovered that the soldiers were chasing after Qin Yining. His moves were even fiercer. Every move he made was aimed at the enemy's vital points. He didn't even care about the wounds on his body. Jinghu Wei swung his arms. He was full of fighting spirit on the battlefield. He was like a hungry tiger coming down the mountain. The Jingji soldiers only had the advantage in numbers. If they really fought with their lives on the line, they wouldn't be a match for Jinghu Wei, who had fought on a mountain of knives and a sea of fire. If it weren't for the chaos caused by the arrows from the outside, the outcome of the battle would have been decided immediately. Even so, Jingzhi and his men still used all their strength and tried their best to get closer to Qin Yining. Qin Yining ran until she was out of breath. Her body was weak, and her throat was panting violently like a broken bellows. At this time, her forehead was covered with sweat. The mask on her face was half turned up. She tore it off and put it in her arms. Whoosh! Another sound pierced through the air. Qin Yining felt a gust of cold wind behind her head, and her hair stood on end. She hurriedly lay down on the ground. 2 arrows were nailed to a big tree beside her. If she didn't dodge, she was afraid that the 2 arrows would directly pierce through her. Her eyes widened. Just as Tian Jizi said, the other party didn't want to capture her alive this time. Li Qitian might really be here to avenge Li Helan. If they wanted to be hostages, the 2 children would be enough. She was being targeted today. Qin Yining scrambled to her feet. She anxiously ran behind the bushes on the side. Buzz! Another arrow was shot at the place where she was just a moment ago. How could Qin Yining not understand? She didn't have the slightest bit of hope. She didn't think that she could be captured alive. In this situation, she would die if there was even the slightest mistake. At this critical moment, there was a rush of footsteps from outside the forest. Then, more than 10 people rushed in with shining swords. The person in the lead had a handsome face. As soon as he saw Jinghu Wei and his men behind Jingzhi, he shouted, "Brothers, hold on. Tang Xiao, damn you. Why are you only here now?" Jinghu Wei naturally recognized Tang Xiao. When he saw that the reinforcements had arrived, he became even more excited. Everyone's arms were filled with strength. Jingzhi recognized Tang Xiao and hurriedly reprimanded him, "Quick, go and save the princess. They have an archer chasing after the princess." Tang Xiao's face turned cold. He hurriedly said yes and led the 10 people who came with him in the direction of Qin Yining. At this time, Qin Yining was completely exhausted. Every breath of cold air that entered her lungs was like a knife stabbing into her. She only felt that her reactions were becoming slower and slower. Her legs were becoming weaker and weaker. She wasn't paying attention and tripped over a protruding tree root. A cry of alarm was stuck in her throat. Before she could make a sound, she heard the sound of wind blowing past her ear. Then, she felt a chill on her right shoulder. An intense pain and numbness suddenly attacked her. It was so painful that tears almost fell out of her eyes. She looked down and saw that her right shoulder had been pierced by an arrow. The sharp arrowhead was sticking out of her shoulder blade. Fresh blood quickly dyed her plain clothes red. "I hit the target, I hit the target. Quick, it's over there." Qin Yining gritted her teeth and flipped herself up. She staggered forward. Scarlet blood dripped down her sleeves and the corners of her clothes. Her vision turned black again. Her leg stumbled and she fell down a steep slope. "Princess!" Tang Xiao led 10 people and gradually chased after her. Seeing that Qin Yining had been shot by an arrow and had fallen down a steep slope, his eyes immediately turned red. "Quick! Jinghu Wei didn't care about anything else and crazily rushed forward. The 7 or 8 people chasing after Qin Yining saw that there were more than 10 people brandishing their swords and looking like they were going all out. They didn't dare to continue fighting and could only anxiously shoot down a few more arrows. Qin Yining was in so much pain that half of her body was numb. Her face was buried in the snow, but she couldn't move at all. She then heard the sound of arrows piercing through the air. She closed her eyes and a bitter smile hung on her lips. It looked like she was going to die here today. Who would have thought that at this moment, a heavy object would suddenly fall on her body? Her vision turned black and her head buzzed. She couldn't breathe for a long time. Following that, a bloody smell spread around her body. The sound of fighting could be heard from the steep slope. The archers had been stopped by Jinghu Wei. Qin Yining's eyes were tightly shut. She didn't have the strength to move at all. A weak female voice gritted her teeth and said in her ear, "Hey! Don't die." Following that, there was a painful gasp. The heavy object that was pressing down on Qin Yining's body was flipped over. Qin Yining struggled to find some strength. She turned around and saw Tian Jizi lying on her side. She had an arrow in her back and an arrow had pierced through her thigh. Blood dyed the white snow below her red. "You! Xian Gu, are you all right?" Qin Yining struggled to get up. She never would have thought that it was Tian Jizi who had blocked in front of her. Tian Jizi was half lying on the ground, exhausted. She said weakly, "You troublemaker. It's all your fault. This Xian Gu has such a high level of cultivation. Nothing good ever happens when I meet you. You're trouble, you're a variable. You're a huge troublemaker." Qin Yining couldn't move his arm. He could only use his left hand to support her. "Are you all right? Don't scold me. Save your energy." Chapter 1155. In the dark forest, the snow reflected the moonlight and the warm light from the torches. Qin Yining could clearly see Tian Jizi's situation. The arrow in her back had hit her waist, which was a vital point. The puncture wound on her thigh had also damaged her blood vessels. Her blood stained the snow like a red lotus. Qin Yining's tears suddenly welled up. Yes, I'm a troublemaker. It's my fault. Don't talk anymore. I'll save you. I'll definitely save you." She struggled to stand up and shouted with all her might, "Bing tang, bing tang." However, the forest was very big, and the situation in front of them was chaotic. The sound of weapons clashing and shouting was endless. Bing tang was hidden in the southeast, so it was impossible for them to hear it for a while. Tian Jizi rolled her eyes and scolded weakly, "What are you shouting for? Are you afraid that the pursuers won't be able to find you?" "But I have medicine in my arms." Tian Jizi became even weaker after saying a few words. Qin Yining hurried forward and supported Tian Jizi's side with difficulty. He rubbed her chest. First, he took out a loose oiled paper bag. Inside it was a biscuit with bacon. Then, he pulled out a tightly wrapped oiled paper bag. It was obviously a drumstick. Tian Jizi curled her lips and watched as Qin Yining pulled out 5 oiled paper bags containing snacks from her arms. Then, he took out a small porcelain bottle. Qin Yining didn't care about anything else. He uncorked the bottle and poured the contents into Tian Jizi's mouth. "It's too bitter. This is your life-saving medicine. You have to take it even if it's bitter." The Tian Jizi weakly swallowed the medicine and lay on the ground. She couldn't help but mutter, "Could it be that I'm destined to face this calamity? You're a variable and troublesome person. It's all your fault. If it weren't for you, I would still have a few more decades." A few more decades to eat and drink and live a carefree and happy life. It's all because of you. It's my fault. I've implicated you. Save your energy. I'll definitely get Bing Tang to save you. Bah. I don't believe you. You must want me to kick my leg right now. The Tian Jizi said through gritted teeth. Then, his voice weakened. His head tilted and he fell into the snow. Qin Yining choked with sobs and did not dare to check Tian Jizi's breathing. It was the same again. It was the same every time. Last time, Sakurai had died for her. Now, someone was trying to save her. She wasn't any nobler than anyone else. Why did she have to rely on someone else's sacrifice to save her life? Tian Jizi was indeed strange and calculative. She didn't care about Pang Zhao's wishes and was determined to push Pang Zhao onto the throne. In order to achieve her goal, she was indeed unscrupulous. But why did she base her survival on Tian Jizi's sacrifice? Moreover, she was Mu Jinghu's master. Princess, how are you? The battle on the steep slope had come to an end. Tang Xiu slid down nimbly with her men. When she saw that there was an arrow in Qin Yining's right shoulder blade and her clothes were stained with blood, her heart pounded. Qin Yining shook his head with a pale face. I'm fine. Quick, carry Tian Jizi. Let's go find Bing Tang and the others. Yes. Tang Xiu immediately ordered Jinghu Wei to carry Tian Jizi. She apologized and supported Qin Yining as they walked in the direction she had pointed out. Qin Yining took off the belt on her outer robe and hastily tied it around her right shoulder to stop the bleeding. However, she was too tired and had not recovered from her illness. She was still seeing black. She was holding on with her last breath. She hadn't seen the safety of her children. She hadn't let Bing Tang treat Tian Jizi. She couldn't lose consciousness at this time. Tang Xiu supported Qin Yining. She felt that her footsteps were getting heavier and heavier. She was also getting more and more worried. Princess, please hold on a little longer. Qin Yining felt like there were hundreds and thousands of flies flying around her ears. After a long time, she realized that Tang Xiu was talking to her. She forced herself to nod and comforted, it's fine. I can still hold on. Tang Xiu saw Qin Yining's appearance and became even more worried. Princess, sorry. He handed his sword to his comrade and picked up Qin Yining. Qin Yining's world spun before she was picked up by Tang Xiu. This action caused some blood to flow out of her shoulder. It made a sound when it landed on the snow. At this time, there was no time to care about the etiquette between men and women. Saving people was more important. Tang Xiu picked up her pace as she carried Qin Yining. The other people carrying Tian Jizi also picked up their pace. Qin Yining gradually lost her strength. She could no longer straighten her neck and stop herself from leaning against Tang Xiu. She slowly closed her eyes. Her entire body was filled with a bone-chilling cold. It was like someone had stuffed a large ice cube into her heart. She even felt that her eyebrows and hair were about to freeze. Tang Xiu felt Qin Yining's body go completely limp. She lowered her head and saw that she had fainted. She was almost scared out of her wits. Hurry and find someone. Bing Tang. Sir Xia. Bing Tang. Ji Yun, where are you? Sir Xia, where are you? Everyone searched in the direction Qin Yining had pointed out. They were anxiously shouting for help. Very quickly, they heard some rustling sounds not far in front of them. Following that, Xia Yu's voice was heard, is that Tang Xiu? That's me. Tang Xiu replied loudly. She carried Qin Yining and ran over, where's Bing Tang? Hurry and let Princess take a look. Princess Consort is injured. When they heard that Qin Yining was injured, the people who were hiding in the tree hole jumped in fright and crawled out one after another. They were originally skeptical of what Tianjizi had said. They thought that the door of life and the direction might just be a casual remark. However, they did not expect that Xiaoyu would lead everyone in the direction Tianjizi had pointed out. They really found the hidden tree hole. They hid themselves and listened to the sounds of fighting in the distance. They waited anxiously for the news. Who knew that they would receive the news that Qin Yining was injured? Ji Yun was the first to rush over. When Tang Xiu saw Ji Yun, she couldn't help but grin. Ji Yun, how are you? I'm fine. When Ji Yun saw that half of Qin Yining's body was covered in blood and that there was an arrowhead sticking out of his shoulder, her tears fell. How did this happen? I should have followed Princess Consort. How did she get injured like this? Tang Xiu hurriedly put down Qin Yining. Bing Tang hurriedly came over to check. He tore open Qin Yining's clothes and inserted a few needles near her shoulder through her inner clothes. This won't do. We have to find a clean and warm place to remove the arrow for Princess Consort. Miss Bing Tang, take a look at her situation. She blocked the arrow for Princess Consort just now. Princess Consort has been anxiously asking you to save her. The other two Jinghu Wei placed Tianjizi on the ground. Bing Tang's heart skipped a beat. She hurriedly went to take a look. When she saw the location of the arrow, her tears fell. Shizuan, back in Dian, Prince Ning had sent her to the Fairy Lady Temple. She had been Tianjizi's disciple for a few days and received Tianjizi's protection. Although their positions were different now, Bing Tang would never forget this kindness. Ji Yun said anxiously, Bing Tang, how is Fairy Lady? Bing Tang sniffled. Her situation is not good. He turned around to look at the Jinghu Wei. Can we find a place nearby? Princess Consort and Fairy Lady's injuries need to be treated as soon as possible. Lu Village is up ahead. But Princess Consort and Fairy Lady can't take it anymore. Why don't we do it here? Xiaoyu turned around and pointed at the tree hole where they had been hiding. Although it's a little short, it's not a problem for two people to lie down. The situation was urgent, and there was no time to choose a place. Bing Tang thought for a while and nodded. Master Zhong hurriedly took off his cotton cloak and laid it on the ground of the tree hole. Xiaoyu also took off her cloak. Tang Xiu and the others went to find dry branches and lit a fire outside the hole. Everyone bent over and carried Tianjizi and Qin Yining in. Bing Tang and Ji Yun then bent over and went in. Ji Yun helped Bing Tang by lighting the lantern. At this time, the battle between Jing Xie and the others had come to an end. The Jingji guards who had been chasing after them had all been killed, and there were more than 10 people on Qin Yining's side who had suffered different degrees of injuries. They helped each other to the tree hole where Qin Yining was. Other than the dozen people that Tianjizi had brought, everyone knew each other. They greeted each other and asked about Qin Yining's situation with concern. Tang Xiu whispered, Princess Consort and Fairy Lady are both injured. Bing Tang is currently treating them. The situation is still unclear. Upon hearing that Tianjizi was injured, the dozen men changed their relaxed and lazy attitude and stood up. What? Sect leader is injured. It turned out that these people were from the Tianji sect. The man in the lead stood up and bowed to Tang Xiu, Xiaoyu, and the others. Fong Hailing greets you. Young hero Fong greets you. Xiaoyu returned the greeting. May I ask how is sect leader's situation? Xiaoyu sighed and said, just now, I heard from Bing Tang that Fairy Lady had 2 arrow wounds, one of which was a vital point. Her situation is not optimistic. Fong Hailing and the man in black behind her were silent. They hung their heads as if they had been hit by frost. Xiaoyu, Master Zhong, and Liao Zhibing originally did not have a good impression of Tian Jizi. However, this time, Tian Jizi had fallen into such a situation because she had blocked an arrow for Princess Consort. Everyone was more or less concerned about her and felt guilty. The atmosphere was very oppressive. Tang Xiao and the others used a container to boil snow water and sent it into the tree hole for Bing Tang to use. Not long after, the blood water would be poured out and new water would be poured in. After more than 6 hours, the sky was about to brighten. Bing Tang came out of the tree hole with the help of Ji Yun. At this time, everyone was so tired that they leaned on each other and took a few naps. Hearing the movement, Xiaoyu was the first to open her eyes. "Miss Bing Tang, how is it?" Bing Tang said, "The situation has stabilized for the time being, but it's not optimistic. We should immediately find a safe place to let Wang Fei and Xingu rest. It's inconvenient to do anything in this wilderness, and we don't have any medicinal herbs." "That's right." The wet nurse sitting by the bonfire also said, "Little miss and little young master can't stand being tossed around like this." Although the two wet nurses held the children in their arms and wore the cloaks given by Jinghu Wei, the children were still in swaddling clothes. How could they stand the cold environment? Chapter 1156. Tang Xiao also nodded, "That's true." Then, according to Teacher Xie's suggestion, "Where should we go?" "You have to do the exact opposite of that. There are so many of us, it's easy to leave footprints on the road, and I'm afraid we'll meet the pursuers." Xiaoyu was a little hesitant. Master Zhong muttered, "Why don't we go to Princess Consort's farmstead?" On the way from the capital to Huichuan County, there are several farmsteads that belong to Princess Consort. Everyone looked at Master Zhong. Xiaoyu was a little surprised. Aren't Princess Consort's farmsteads mainly in the south? Yes, but Princess Consort said that we have to be prepared in order to be safe. It's not wrong to buy more farmsteads in our spare time. The Jinghu Wei did not know much about Princess Consort, but they admired her. As for Jingzhi, Liao Zhibing, and the others, they had followed Qin Yining for many years and were already convinced by her ability. She was not as surprised as these people. "Since that's the case, let's go to Princess Consort's farmstead." Tang Xiao said, "I'll take a group of people and rush to Lu village first. We'll leave some footprints along the way to attract attention. You can take this opportunity to escort Princess Consort to recuperate." Xiaoyu lowered her head and thought for a moment. In the end, she nodded and said, "That's good. If we go north, we'll go to the border. Why don't you go directly to Wang Yi and leave some footprints along the way? It'll be even better if you can blatantly pretend to be Princess Consort. If you meet pursuers, you can split up and reunite in front of Wang Ye's tent at the border." "That's good, but Princess Consort's place, Princess Consort shouldn't have too many people around her." Xiaoyu looked at the Tianji sect disciples and smiled. With the disciples of the Tianji sect, Princess Consort should be safe. Why don't we let all the Jinghu Wei return to Wang Ye's side? Wang Yi needs people. The Tianji sect disciples led by Fang Hailing all cupped their hands. Jingzhi said, "Don't worry, we'll follow Princess Consort at all times. If there are too many people, it will attract attention." Liao Zhibing also said, "That's right. Our brothers in the Qing-Tian Alliance are all over the martial world. As long as the Alliance Master says the word, isn't it easy to find people to use?" Tang Xiao heard Liao Zhibing say the same thing and thought carefully about Xiaoyu's analysis. She felt that everything was reasonable. If they stayed, they would become a bigger target. It was better to attract the attention of the pursuers for Wang Fei and meet up with Wang Yi at the same time. This way, they could tell Wang Yi about Wang Fei's situation and also let Wang Yi have more people on their side. Tang Xiao nodded. "All right, I'll do as you say." After saying that, He could not help but look at Ji Yun, who was squatting at the entrance of the tree hole and taking care of Qin Yining. Ji Yun smiled at Tang Xiu. Be careful on the road. Tang Xiu's face instantly lit up with a happy smile. She was like a child who had just received a piece of candy. She was so happy that she almost spun in a circle. All right, you too. Take care. Ji Yun nodded with a smile. Xia Yu couldn't help but smile when she saw them act like this. At a time when they were being pursued and Wang Fei was seriously injured, this warmth was enough to light a spark of hope in people's hearts. After the discussion, Tang Xiu led all the Jinghu Wei to bow to Xia Yu and the others. Then she turned and went into the forest to find weapons and horses. She took the carriage that Qin Yining had been on and headed north in the direction of Lujia village. She purposefully left horse hoofprints and carriage tracks in the snow. The rest of the people went to find long branches and used dried branches, vines, and cloaks to make simple beds. They put Qin Yining and Tian Jizi on them and took turns to carry them in the opposite direction of the forest to the fields that Master Zhong had spoken of. In Jing, Li Qitian heard that the assassination attempt had failed and was furious. He raised his hand and threw the inkstone hard at the shoulder of the Jingji Guard Lieutenant Wang Maoji. Rice buckets. All of you are rice buckets. Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. You can't beat the Tatars, but you can't even kill a woman. What is the use of Zhen raising you rice buckets? Wang Maoji knelt on one knee and bowed his head, not saying a word. Xiong Jinshui and the other palace attendants had already obediently bowed their heads and retreated to the most inconspicuous corner. Li Qitian paced back and forth angrily. What a good opportunity. There are so many of you, but you can't even take 2 infants back. You can't even kill a weak woman who doesn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. What are you all doing? Your Majesty, please quell your anger. Wang Maoji bowed. Quell your anger, quell your anger. All day long, you only know how to quell Zhen's anger, but you all never let Zhen be at ease. Tell me, what should we do next? Wang Maoji raised his hands and quickly looked at Li Qitian. He then said in a low voice, this subject will continue to track down the fugitive. Li Qitian took a deep breath and said, I will give you 7 days. If you can't bring the corpse of the Prince Zhongshuan's consort and the 2 little brats to Zhen, then you all can just wait. Yes. Wang Maoji hurriedly kowtowed and carefully retreated. When he arrived outside Yangxin Palace Hall, he let out a long breath. Pang Xiao dressed properly and turned around to pick up the horsewhip on the table. Ji Ziyu pulled Pang Xiao back. His handsome face, which could be said to be peerlessly beautiful, was wrinkled like a bitter gourd. Meng Ji Shi, you can't go back. If you go back, you will die without a doubt. I know. But so what? Pang Zhao's face was full of stubble that he didn't care about. His hair was also casually tied up with a hairband. His entire person exuded a sense of decadence, but it made him look even more handsome and steady. She suffered like this because of me. I couldn't give her a stable life. I made her work hard while she was pregnant. Not only that, I also caused her to be abused like that. She was such a proud person. When has she ever suffered such humiliation? Thinking about it, every time she suffered, it was because of me. Pang Xiao grabbed his hair in frustration. Ji Ziyu saw Pang Xiao like this and also frowned deeply. Shi, you don't have to be like this. This isn't your fault. You can only blame fate. Since she was willing to follow you, she knew what kind of hardships she would have to endure as your consort. She was willing. But I wasn't willing. I pursued her selfishly from the beginning. I unilaterally took her under my wing so that I could give her a good life. I wanted her to live a happy and peaceful life, but what kind of life did I give her? Pang Shao shook his head. I really can't take it anymore. Alon, do you know what this feels like? Watching her suffer while I am thousands of miles away, unable to do anything but watch. This feeling is really too. I know. Ji Ziyu lowered his eyes and smiled bitterly. Am I not the same? I can't help. Pang Shao was immersed in his own thoughts and didn't think carefully about Ji Ziyu's words. The only thing I can do now is to go back obediently and wait for the Emperor to punish me. What's the use of that? If you go to die, will the Emperor let the Qin clan and your child go? But I can't think of any other way. Pang Shao suddenly turned around. His phoenix eyes were bloodshot and his expression was unprecedentedly crazy. Ji Ziyu was shocked. He stepped forward and grabbed Pang Shao's shoulder. He whispered, "Rebel." Pang Shao was stunned. "Rebel? Lead the troops and fight back." Ji Ziyu continued, "You don't have to worry. I will help you." Pang Shao never thought that Ji Ziyu would say this. For a moment, he was really tempted. If he could really lead the troops and fight back, would Li Qitian still refuse to submit? How dare he treat his sister Yi like that? However, such an irrational thought only lasted for a moment. Pang Shao smiled bitterly and shook his head. If I lead the troops and rebel against Li Qitian for my own selfish reasons, wouldn't I become the same kind of person as Li Qitian? Right now the war with the Tatars is in a state of anxiety. In a few more days, I think the Tatars will reach the Desert of the Dead Zone. If I lead the troops in rebellion at this critical moment, won't I give the Tatars a chance to catch their breath? What's more, these people are following me to fight against the Tatars, to drive out the people who invaded them and killed their families. But if I ask them to rebel against the imperial court and work for me alone, would they really be willing? I don't want so many people to work for my decision, and I don't want anyone to be kept in the dark. The Emperor's actions are too extreme, but that's between me and him. There's really no need to cause so many consequences. Dezhou has just been peaceful for a long time. Ji Ziyu looked at Pang Zhao's serious expression and shook his head. You're still the same. You're so stubborn. It's not that I'm stubborn. Pang Zhao sighed. There are some rules that I must abide by. There are some bottom lines that I must not abandon. Then do you really plan to go back and die? Just for your princess and your child? In this world, is there anyone else who can make me so willing to die? Ji Ziyu's lips moved. After a while, he sighed silently. I don't agree. All on. Pang Zhao patted Ji Ziyu's shoulder. Good brother, I know you're doing this for my own good. But there are some things that you have to do even if you know the consequences. This is the principle and bottom line of life. I'm a man, a husband, and the father of a child. I can't just stand by and watch them die. Ji Ziyu pursed his lips and didn't say anything. He just looked at him silently. Pang Zhao patted him on the shoulder. Cheer up. I'll leave Taiden to you. I believe in your ability. It won't be a problem for you to deal with Si Qin and Lu Heng. Have you really decided to go? If you go, we might. Pang Zhao heard this and sighed. All on, I know. I'm already satisfied to have a brother like you in this life. Our kowtowing to the ground wasn't in vain. You've helped me a lot over the years. You're my best friend and my blood is thicker than water. This will never change. Even if I lose my life in the capital this time, the brotherhood between us will not change. Ji Ziyu pursed his lips even tighter. His peach blossom eyes became misty. This man who looked cold and decisive on the outside was so sad at this moment. Chapter 1157. Pang Zhao shook his head and patted Ji Ziyu's shoulder. Good brother, I appreciate your kindness. You have a bright future ahead of you, so there's no need to delay it for me. Besides, can you really let go of the war at the front line? You are more familiar with Beijiang than I am. You have fought against the Titan for many years. Now that you have finally seen the light, wouldn't it be a pity to give up? As generals, we have to think not only for ourselves, but also for the people. If we give up now, what will happen to the people at the border? Ji Ziyu's heart was touched. His expression wavered for a moment, but in the blink of an eye, he said firmly, "Even so, I won't allow you to go back and die. I have made up my mind. All on, there's no need to stop me." Pang Shao cupped his hands and bade farewell to Ji Ziyu solemnly. He turned around and strode out of the tent. Mu Jinghu stood in front of the tent. "Have you decided to go back?" "Yes." Pang Shao smiled. However, when he looked up, he saw that the soldiers in the army were all gathered around him. The South Ping Army, Tiger Army, Dragon Stallion Army, and the soldiers and horses that had been recruited along the way had followed Pang Shao and Ji Ziyu for a long time. They had long trusted them. At this moment, they were all looking at Pang Shao with concern. "Wang Yi, are you going back to the capital?" "Yes. Your Majesty's decree. Even though this is a critical moment, I have no choice but to go back." Pang Zhao's voice was blown away by the strong wind. His messy hair was blown up by the wind, revealing a sincere smile on his handsome face. "In the future, we will have to rely on all of you to fight against the Tatars. Duke Dinghua's soldiers are like gods. I believe that with Duke Dinghua and all of you holding the fort, it will be easy to deal with the Titan." When the soldiers heard this, they were not as excited as they usually were. Everyone's gaze was gloomy and complicated. Su Weiji sighed. "Wang Yi will definitely die if he returns to the capital. Are you really not going to reconsider?" Pang Shao smiled and shook his head gently. Huzi wiped his face and suddenly threw his saber to the ground. "Wang Yi, I'll go back with you. If we die together. The Son of Heaven is heartless and unrighteous. You were fighting the Tatars at the border, but the Son of Heaven kidnapped your wife and child. You're loyal and devoted, but you've always been doubted and suppressed. When you led our South pacifying army brothers and new recruits back to the capital, the old emperor didn't even let us through the city gates. I knew from the start that your loyalty was not worth it. Now, his wife and child have been kidnapped." Huzi turned around, stomped his feet and roared, "We've been risking our lives on the front lines, but our homes have been raided by our own people. Brothers, do you think this is something that humans should do?" Everyone had heard about how the emperor treated Pang Shao. These days, there were also many rumors about the emperor urgently summoning Pang Shao back to the capital. Everyone had already cursed Huzi in private when he was angry. They were a group of men who didn't fear death and fought with the Tatars. If their wives and children were kidnapped because they were afraid of them, how would they feel? Moreover, they had always admired Pang Shao. He was always at the front of the charge and always the last to retreat. Although he was a prince, he ate and lived with them. He never gave them any special treatment. When he had nothing to do, he would train with them and practice fist and saber techniques. They were comrades who had rolled in the trenches together, so their relationship was naturally not ordinary. Now, the person they respected was being humiliated by the Son of Heaven. How could this group of hot-blooded men endure this? This is too much. What is this? When we were hungry, your Majesty didn't give us enough to eat. It was Wang Yi and Princess Consort who used their own money to feed us. Why didn't your Majesty stop it at that time? The Emperor's actions are too disappointing. Isn't it because he felt that Wang Yi had military power and he was worried? But Wang Yi didn't want to take his position. If Wang Yi really wanted to take it, he would have become the emperor a few years ago. Shoo, you don't want to live anymore. What's there to be afraid of? If you make me angry, I'll rebel against that son of a bitch. Yes, rebel against that son of a bitch. The soldiers' morale was high and they all roared. As long as Pang Shao nodded, they could immediately rebel. Pang Shao helplessly held his forehead and waved his hand. Okay, everyone, quiet down. The roars that were like waves gradually subsided. In the camp that was like a sea of white, many people had gradually gathered in this direction. Pang Shao saw that the situation was getting out of control and hurriedly reprimanded loudly, everyone, go do what you need to do. Don't gather here. The Titan can organize a counterattack at any time. Why are you all gathering here? Disperse. Go back to your positions. Hearing this, the soldiers slightly hesitated. Some continued to patrol, but others stayed where they were and inquired about the situation at Pang Zhao's side from afar. Currently, more than 400,000 men and horses were stationed in the main camp. The tent stretched for several dozen li, forming a white barrier between the Tatar and the Great Zhou Empire. Just by gathering the officers and soldiers around the central tent, it was enough to create a huge commotion. If they were really angered and caused a mutiny, the situation would be out of control. Pang Shao bowed to the people around him. Everyone, please calm down and listen to me. The emperor urgently summoned me back to the capital. Perhaps there is something important to discuss. I have been delayed for many days and am now planning to listen to the imperial edict. Everyone, please stay here and listen to Duke Dinghua's arrangements. Only by breaking the Titan and protecting the mountains and rivers can you live up to being a man of Dezhou. Wang Yi, don't try to comfort us. Your Majesty wants you back because he wants your life. If the emperor wants the subject to die, the subject must die. I, Pang Shao, am loyal to Dezhou. I can't have any thoughts of overstepping my boundaries. Even if I die, I have no regrets. Wang Yi. I have made up my mind. Everyone, please disperse. Pang Shao bowed again. The soldiers were also helpless at this time. After all, their words carried little weight. If the emperor wanted to make things difficult for Wang Yi, what could they do? Everyone dispersed dispiritedly and made way for Pang Shao. Pang Shao sighed and turned to look at Ji Ziyu, who was pursing his lips. I'll have to trouble you in the future. Ji Ziyu clenched his fists by his side. The veins on his forehead bulged, and his whole body trembled. Pang Shao smiled at him and turned to leave. His messy long hair and black robe fluttered in the wind and snow. Just by looking at his back, one could feel the desolation of a hero at the end of his road. Everywhere he passed, the soldiers looked at him with complicated expressions. Some were anxious, some urged him to stay, and some wiped their tears with their sleeves. Huzi took a deep breath, picked up his saber, and chased after him. Su Weiji also cupped his hands in farewell to Ji Ziyu and resolutely followed. Pang Shao heard the footsteps and turned to look. He smiled helplessly and said, "You guys can stay. Mr. Su is a great talent. He can help Duke Ding." Su Weiji waved his hand and said in a carefree manner, "This old man is old. It's already worth it to be able to follow Wang Yi for so many years. Even if the capital is a dragon's pool or a tiger's den, this old man will accompany Wang Yi." Yes. Huzi also said, "After following Wang Yi for so many years, even if you lose your head, you still want to leave me behind." As soon as Huzi finished speaking, dozens of Jinghu Wei also lined up. They neatly walked to the front and cupped their hands. Although they didn't say much, their intentions were obvious. Pang Zhao's phoenix eyes turned red. But he just smiled and said, "Why do you have to do this? We pledge our lives to follow Wang Yi." Huzi and Jinghu Wei saluted together. Pang Shao felt helpless. He knew that going back was a dead end. He didn't want to take these people with him to die, but they insisted on following him. For a moment, Peng Xiao couldn't think of a way to dissuade these people. He didn't even know how to find a way to survive in the capital. Just as Peng Xiao was in a dilemma, a person suddenly rushed in from outside the camp. Reporting to Wang Yi. Bodyguard Tang Xiao has brought people back. Peng Xiao paused and hurriedly said, quickly invite them in. With Tang Xiao's return, Peng Xiao wasn't in a hurry to leave. He returned to the tent. Su Weiji vaguely felt that the situation had taken a turn for the better. He discussed with Ji Ziyu to first disperse the soldiers. Ji Ziyu had a high reputation in the army. When he gave the order, no one dared to disobey. The crowd quickly dispersed. Not long after, Tang Xiao brought a group of Jinghu Wei to the main tent. Wang Yi. Why are you back? How is Wang Fei? Tang Xiao lowered her eyes and said, reporting to Wang Yi, 5 days ago. Peng Xiao listened to Tang Xiao's report and his brows gradually furrowed. When he heard that Qin Yining had suffered many injuries when he escaped from the capital, he was already furious. When he heard that they had been chased and Qin Yining's shoulder had been pierced by an arrow, his heart was in pain and his eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. Wang Yi, it's all thanks to Tian Jizi this time. If she hadn't dared to stand in front of Wang Fei at the last moment, Wang Fei might have. But Tian Jizi has been shot in the back and one in the leg. Bing Tang girl said that Tian Jizi's situation is not optimistic. Mu Jinghu's face turned pale when he heard this. You mean, Shizhuan might have, Tang Xiao nodded and said, that arrow hit her vitals and she lost a lot of blood. We rushed to distract the pursuers to find Wang Yi, so we don't know what happened after that. In fact, the Bing Tang girl said that Wang Fei and Tian Jizi's situation was not optimistic. Luckily, Little Master and Little Miss were well protected and did not lose a single hair. Peng Xiao stared blankly in front of him. His eyes were bloodshot and his body swayed. He staggered 2 steps before he managed to stabilize himself. Peng Xiao could not imagine how hopeless Qin Yining must have felt when she was being chased in the forest. When she had gone to distract the pursuers to protect the children, was she already prepared to die? If she had died then, he would have been so far away and would only know about her news many days later. He could not do anything for her, not even in time to cry. In her hopeless moments, did she feel resentment or hatred? Did she regret marrying him? If she was no longer around, what was the use of having only the children alive? He could have many children, but there was only one sister Yi. Where are they going now? Peng Xiao's voice was hoarse, as if it did not come from him. Tang Xiao said, Master Zhong said that Wang Fei also has a business in the north. At this moment, they are trying their best to avoid the pursuers and bring Wang Fei and Tian Jizi to their business for treatment. I think that once they are settled, Mr. Xia will think of a way to send a letter to Wang Yi. Chapter 1158. Ji Ziyu did not think so much and said in a low voice, Jishi, since the Qin clan has escaped, there is no need for you to return to the capital. Peng Xiao heard this and slowly nodded. You are right. There is no use for me to go back now. When she needed him the most, he was not by her side. What was the use of him going back now? Seeing that Peng Xiao did not insist on going to his death, Ji Ziyu finally sighed in relief. But the atmosphere in the tent was too tense. Ji Ziyu did not know what to say. Peng Xiao took 2 steps back and sat down on the wooden stool. He asked, I saw that you brought back a lot of Jinghu Wei. It was Sir Xie's idea. Since Wang Fei wants to hide, it will be too eye-catching if there are too many people. I see. You have all worked hard. Go and rest first. Yes. Tang Xiao and the others bowed and left the tent in a single file. Ji Ziyu took a step forward and comforted her, "Don't worry. Heaven helps the worthy. Since you were able to escape, nothing will happen to you." "Yes." Pang Xiao nodded, but his expression was full of panic. Ji Ziyu squatted in front of Pang Xiao and looked at him at eye level. He said, "It is time for you to do something. If you let this go, who knows what the Emperor will do next? He is forcing you into a dead end. Are you going to sit and wait for death? Or do you want to abandon the war at the front line and go back to accompany the Qin clan? Isn't that too irresponsible?" "I will not do that." Pang Xiao smiled and said energetically, "Since they are no longer under the Emperor's control, I do not need to go back and die." He turned to look at Su Weiji. "Sir Su, I have an idea." "Wang Yi, please speak." Su Weiji cupped his hands. Pang Xiao thought and said a few words in a low voice. Percent in a manor in Shirley Village on the outskirts of Huichuan County. Qin Yining leaned against the pillow with a pale face and urged, "All right, quickly carry the brothers and sisters down. Don't let them die here." "Yes." The wet nurses bowed respectfully and carried the children away. Ji Yun brought over a small white porcelain bowl. "Wang Fei, take the medicine. It's not hot now." Qin Yining nodded and impatiently ate the bitter medicine with a spoon. She took the bowl and drank it in one gulp. It was so bitter that she frowned and let out a sigh of relief. Yuan Yun hurriedly brought her some warm water to rinse her mouth. Qin Yining gulped down a small bowl of water and sighed, "I'm not picky and I'm not afraid of bitter things. But this time, I don't know if Bing Tang is deliberately playing tricks on me, but the medicine is fishy and bitter. It's so bitter that I feel nauseous when I put it in my mouth. Wang Fei, good medicine tastes bitter. You were seriously injured this time. Bing Tang said that it will take at least 3 to 5 years for you to recover. You have to take medicine during this period of time. You should get used to it as soon as possible." "I have to get used to it even if I don't want to." Qin Yining sighed and patted her pale face. She asked, "How is Tian Jizi?" Ji Yun shook her head with a grave expression. Qin Yining sat up with difficulty. "Help me find thick clothes. I want to see her." "Wang Fei, it's cold outside. Your fever has just subsided. Don't be exposed to the cold wind." "It's fine. She did it to save me." Ji Yun knew Qin Yining's stubborn temper. Once she made a decision, she would not change her mind. She could only helplessly take a warm cloak and drape it over Qin Yining. She also took a guanyin bag and put it on her. After covering her completely, she carefully helped her up and went to the main room next door. Outside the door was a spacious courtyard. Not far away, Jingzhe and the others were practicing martial arts on the open ground. When they saw Qin Yining come out, they hurriedly rushed over. "Master." Qin Yining's pale face had a smile. She waved her hand and said, "I'm fine. You can go do your own things." "Yes." Everyone bowed and left. Qin Yining went next door. As soon as she lifted the curtain, a hot wind with the smell of bitter medicine hit her face. There were more than 10 men dressed like farmers sitting outside. They were all members of the Tianji sect. When they saw Qin Yining, Fang Hailing led everyone to stand up and cup their hands in greeting to Qin Yining. Qin Yining nodded in greeting. He went around the animal skin screen and turned a corner. He lifted the curtain and entered the inner room. Bing Tang was sitting on a small stool beside the heated Kong. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Tian Jizi had lost a lot of weight. She was lying on the heated Kong with her eyes slightly open. Her dry and pale lips were moving, as if she was saying something. "Xian Gu, how are you?" When Qin Yining came closer, Bing Tang hurriedly stood up and made room for her. Tian Jizi rolled her eyes at Qin Yining. Her dry and hoarse voice was extremely weak. This Xian Gu has lost this time. When he heard Tian Jizi say this, Qin Yining's heart skipped a beat. An indescribable bitterness filled his heart. That won't happen. We will do our best to save you. I've already ordered people to find the herbs you need. It's a waste of effort. Just now, I tried to persuade Miss Tang. Life and death are fated. Tian Jizi glared at Qin Yining again. This old man originally had a lifespan of 113 years and would die in late autumn. But now, I've met a troublemaker like you. I'm only 60 years old, and I'm going to die. It's all your fault that I've lost half of my lifespan. Qin Yining's heart was heavy. He shook his head and said, "You'll be fine. This is all fate." Tian Jizi coughed a few times and said weakly, "I can predict anything. I can predict this and that, but I can't predict a variable like you. Whenever I meet you, I can't predict what will happen, and my plans will change. Even my own life will be at stake. I thought that with my heroic reputation, I couldn't be considered a good person. I didn't expect that I would actually die to save a troublemaker like you." Cough, 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 cough. Xian Gu, calm down. Don't say any more. Qin Yining's heart was filled with mixed feelings. His face became even paler. Tian Jizi coughed for a long time and panted a few times. When she opened her mouth again, her voice was even weaker. "Forget it. Since it's already like this, I have nothing to say. From now on, you can accompany Pang Xiaowao." Hearing her words, which sounded like she was entrusting him to her, Qin Yining finally burst into tears. Tears slid down her pale cheeks, fell on her fur collar, and slid down the back of her hand. Tian Jizi saw her tears and snorted. "Forget it. You're not a bad person. I saved you, and it's a good deed. Right now, I really can't bear to leave. Xian Gu, what other wishes do you have? Tell me. If I can do it, I'll do my best." Tian Jizi closed her eyes, as if it took a lot of energy to open them and speak. She said in a tired voice, "I only have one wish. What's the use of telling you? You're a variable. What can you guarantee? Right now, I'm just waiting for a piece of news." Qin Yining sniffled. Ji Yun took a handkerchief and wiped her tears. She gently advised, "Princess consort, take care of your body. You haven't recovered yet. Be careful not to cry too much and your head will hurt again." Tian Jizi seemed to be impatient and rolled her eyes again. Qin Yining took the handkerchief and wiped her tears. She rubbed her temples and said, "If something happens to you, how am I going to explain it to young Master Mu? Xian Gu, you have to hold on. Although the situation looks dangerous, there's still a chance." Tian Jizi closed her eyes, as if she was extremely tired. She didn't want to speak again. Qin Yining looked at Tian Jizi's weak appearance and her heart was filled with guilt. At this time, she especially hated her own incompetence. This feeling of watching others sacrifice themselves to save her and being unable to do anything was worse than cutting her flesh with a blunt knife. Qin Yining couldn't forget Leighton's death for the rest of her life. Looking back, there was also Ruilan, who died to save her. There were also many bodyguards who risked their lives to save her when she was in danger. She didn't even know if they were alive. Thinking about it carefully, she was able to live until today because of the sacrifices of many people. She didn't know how heavy a soul could be in a person's life. "Princess consort." Xia Yu's slightly hurried voice suddenly came from outside the door. Qin Yining stood up with Ji Yun's help and slowly walked to the door. "Sir Xia." Xiaoyu's expression was somewhat excited. She said in a deep voice, Wang Yi has issued a declaration of war in the northern border. What? Qin Yining was extremely shocked. Xiaoyu said, this news has already spread to us. Presumably, everyone in the capital already knows about it. Wang Yi's declaration of war didn't condemn the emperor, but it already made his intentions clear. Wang Yi said that his intention was to fight for the people of the world and for the peace of Dezhou. However, Your Majesty listened to the slanderous words of a villain and refused to believe a loyal official. Instead, he wanted to rape the family of a loyal official. This caused the soldiers who were fighting outside to be bitterly disappointed. However, for the peace of the people, he won't give up on the front lines at this critical juncture of the Taitan War. However, the emperor's actions, ask yourself honestly, don't you feel ashamed at all? Qin Yining's fists, which were hidden in his sleeves, gradually tightened. From Xiaoyu's narration, it was enough to see Pang Zhao's resentment and helplessness at this time. It also made his position clear to everyone in the world. Li Qitian's previous actions had already aroused a lot of discussion and dissatisfaction. In addition, it wasn't a secret that she had been locked up in a prisoner carriage and paraded through the streets all day long. She was also being hunted down. Once this declaration of war was released, the world would definitely be filled with discontent. Li Qitian would probably gnash his teeth in hatred and stomp his feet in anger. He really didn't know what kind of crazy things Li Qitian would do after this. But thinking about it again, Pang Zhao was currently at the front lines. Other than taking her and the two children as hostages, Li Qitian really didn't have any other way to keep Pang Zhao in check. After all of the soldiers and horses in the Taitan rebellion were paid by themselves. Qin Yining couldn't help but raise the corner of his lips. His surprise turned into joy. The day he had been waiting for had finally arrived. Shizhuan, Shizhuan. Suddenly, the sound of Bing Tang's exclamation came from inside the room. Qin Yining was startled. He immediately turned around and was about to go inside the room. However, the people of the Tianji sect were a step faster. More than 10 people rushed in and pushed aside the Bing Tang by the bed. They all knelt down and said, Sect leader. Chapter 1159. Xian Gu. Qin Yining quickly walked in, but was blocked by the crying disciples of the Tianji sect. Fang Heiling, who had been reasonable at first, was now like an angry beast. She roared in grief, it's all because of you that our sect master died. How dare you come closer? Sect master! Sect master! The rest of the disciples knelt by the bed and desperately checked Tianji's breathing. She was already dead. They were so scared that they sat on the ground and cried loudly. The crying in the room was so loud that it shook the earth and the mountains. Bing Tang was already lying on the wall, sobbing silently. Qin Yining closed his eyes and raised his head. His tears were already flowing. Tianji had been busy her entire life trying to reach the top of the Ziwei Emperor star. Qin Yining sometimes felt that it was hard for her. She lived in a chaotic world and was trapped in the struggle of the imperial court. But now that she thought about it, no matter how carefree Tianji was, she was still a woman. Because she joined the Tianji sect, she became famous at a young age. Jing Tong's divination and geomancy techniques were enough to carry the world's affairs on his shoulders. How could she have it easy? Sometimes, they had different standpoints and different goals. But Tianji was someone who only wanted to do one thing her entire life. In the end, she was willing to sacrifice her life to achieve her goal. It was truly admirable. But now, this person had died in order to save her. Qin Yining couldn't hold it in any longer and burst into tears. No one would have thought that the Xian Gu, who had once caused so much trouble, would lose her life like this. Bing Tang and Tian Jizi had a master and disciple relationship. She hadn't repaid the favor of Tian Jizi for protecting her. Now that Tian Jizi had died, she couldn't help but cry. The disciples of the Tianji sect were crying even harder. The entire farm was immersed in a sorrowful atmosphere. After a long time, Xiaoyu wiped the corners of her eyes and said, "Princess, I'll go prepare the birthday materials. Choose the best for everything." Qin Yining's voice was hoarse from crying, and his eyes were red and swollen. Fong Hailing wiped her tears with her sleeve and stood up. "There's no need. Our Heaven's Secret sect will take care of the sovereign's funeral. There's no need for Princess Consort to worry." Qin Yining knew that Tian Jizi had died in order to save her, so the people of the Tianji sect naturally held a grudge against her. This was also her fault. Qin Yining said warmly, "Of course I have to contribute to Fairy's funeral. Please don't refuse. There's really no need." Fong Hailing said in a deep voice, "The people of our Heaven's Secret sect naturally have to be buried in the Heaven's Secret Valley. What's more, when the sect master came this time, he had already predicted that things would not bode well for him. He had already made arrangements for his funeral." Fong Hailing choked with sobs again. She wiped her tears with her sleeve and said, "Sect master said that she will sleep in Tianji Valley in the future and will not leave." Qin Yining bit her lower lip and lowered her head. Her tears gushed out again. She really wanted to help, but the people of the Heaven's Secret sect seemed to hate her and would not allow her subordinates to intervene. Fong Hailing ordered people to prepare a coffin and a carriage. She didn't even prepare a mourning hole. She wrapped Tian Jizi's body in a white cloth, carried it into the coffin, and put it on the carriage. Qin Yining chased out of the door. "Are you really not going to set up a mourning hole? This is inconsistent with the customs. There's no need for you to worry." Fong Hailing interrupted Qin Yining and said, "Our Heaven's Secret sect has our own rules. It's cold and it's convenient for us to return to Tianji Valley. In order to let the sect master rest in peace, Princess Consort, please don't say anything more." Qin Yining really didn't understand the rules of the Heaven's Secret sect. Moreover, the other party clearly had resentment and was brooding over Tian Jizi's death. Qin Yining frowned and took a step back. Bing Tang and Ji Yun supported her on both sides. "Princess Consort, take care of yourself. The Heaven's Secret sect has its own rules. Just let them be." "That's right, Princess Consort. Your body hasn't recovered yet. It's really not suitable to be left out in the cold. Tian Jizi has already passed away. You should also take care of yourself." Qin Yining watched the people of the Heaven's Secret sect pack their luggage and secure the coffin. They didn't let any of Qin Yining's subordinates help at all. She couldn't help but sigh faintly and turned to walk back to the bedroom. "How will I explain to Sir Mu in the future? Mu Jinghu's existence was to protect Tian Jizi. Mu Jinghu, who was originally supposed to protect Tian Jizi, left her side for Pang Zhao's safety. If Mu Jinghu knew about this, would he also fall into self-blame?" Qin Yining didn't dare to imagine how a person like Mu Jinghu, who was so loyal to his promises, would feel. "Princess Consort, don't let your imagination run wild. Things have already come to this point. There's no point in thinking too much. Princess Consort, you should take care of your own health. Moreover, Wang Ye's side has already issued a declaration of war. If the emperor comes for you, little miss, and little young master again, what should we do?" Qin Yining returned to the room. She took off her cloak and leaned tiredly on the heated Kong bed by the window. She rested her head on the soft pillow and sighed deeply. "I know all of this. I just feel guilty towards Tian Jizi. These are two different things. No matter what she did in the past, whether she wanted to kill me or not, she did die to save me this time. Bing Tang and Ji Yun also felt bad. Like Qin Yining, they were people who valued friendship. Qin Yining had gone to Waterzai country in a fit of anger because of Lei Feng's death. Now, Tian Jizi's death only made her hate Li Qitian even more. Princess Consort, the people from the Tianji clan have set off. Jing Zhe replied at the door. Qin Yining leaned to the side and opened the window. She saw the people from the Tianji clan driving the carriage slowly leaving the country estate. Night was about to fall. The falling snow looked sparkling under the light. The pitch-black coffin was parked in the middle of the carriages. Looking at it made one feel lonely. Forget it. Let them be. Qin Yining sighed faintly and closed the window. She turned around and ordered Xiaoyu to spread the obituary to the front lines. At the same time, the people in the capital were discussing the contents of Pang Zhao's proclamation. They knew more about this matter than the people elsewhere because they had seen with their own eyes the Prince Zhongshuan's consort locked up in a prison carriage and paraded through the streets in a sorry state in the wind and snow. So the emperor kidnapped the princess consort and Wang Ye's child? It's because of the change of commander at the last minute, right? In the end, it's Prince Zhongshuan's problem of resisting the imperial edict. If he hadn't been so obstinate and refused to give up power, Your Majesty wouldn't be like this. The person who spoke was collectively despised by the people around him. Everyone looked at him with a strange gaze. You're lacking a conscience when you say this. Don't forget, who was it that led the troops to the capital to resolve the siege? Who was it that paid for the disaster victims and the elite troops? When the emperor didn't let Wang Ye's troops enter the city and sent them away with a pole, he was already afraid of Wang Yi. Now that the Tatars have been driven out with great difficulty, Your Majesty is afraid that Prince Zhongshuan's contributions are too great and wants to change the commander at the last minute to let others take the fruits of his labor. Wang Yi wants to continue fighting the Tatars, so Your Majesty kidnaps Wang Ye's wife and child. Tell me, is this something a human would do? Brother, you have to be careful. Watch your words. Don't cause trouble for your family. I'm full and my family isn't hungry. What's there to be afraid of? In the streets, alleys, tea houses, and wine shops of the capital, there were people everywhere discussing and arguing. Some people said that the matter was caused by Pang Zhao's defiance of the imperial edict, but more people had sharp eyes. Everyone knew who had done more for the Zhou dynasty in the Taitan matter. Pang Zhao had always been very popular among the people. His image of being brave, good at fighting, patriotic, and caring for the people had long been deeply ingrained. The emperor was afraid of Pang Zhao. In the past few years, he had done more than one or two strange things. Even if people didn't talk about it, as long as one was a citizen of the capital, who wouldn't remember? In the past, Wang Yi performed meritorious deeds and was even beaten by the emperor with a plank in the palace. Didn't Wang Yi still go fight the Tatars when his injuries got better? Even if you want to slander Wang Yi, come up with a new way to slander him. We're not deaf or mute. The spies arranged by Li Qitian roamed the streets and alleys, recording the discussions of the people in the restaurants and tea houses. When they turned around, they reported back to Li Qitian with a worried and conflicted expression. They knew that if these words reached the emperor's ears, they would be scolded again. Sure enough, Li Qitian flipped over a small table on the spot, scattering the high-quality pastries and tea leaves all over the floor. Who dares to criticize us like this? We are the emperor, yet they dare to gossip behind our backs. Your Majesty, please calm down. The law cannot punish the majority. Right now. Before they could finish speaking, Li Qitian roared angrily, the law cannot punish the majority. Then all of the people in the capital have thoughts of rebelling. This subject does not dare. The spies helplessly bowed their heads. Li Qitian clenched his fists and ground his teeth as he said, all of the land under the heavens belongs to the emperor. If we want someone to die, that person will die. This is our power as the emperor. That Qin clan is nothing but a woman. We can crush her to death as easily as crushing an ant. Even if we wanted her to die, why would it cause so many people to talk about it? Also, what did Pang Zhishi say in his public declaration of war? By avoiding the important and dwelling on the trivial, we have become an incapable ruler who brings disaster to the imperial court and harms the common people. Wasn't he the one who disrespected the emperor first? Do we have to cheer for him because he disrespected the emperor? Everyone pressed their foreheads to the ground, not daring to make a sound. Li Qitian said in a deep voice, "The censorate has drawn up all the evidence of Pang Zhishi's crimes for us." Didn't Pang Zhishi refuse to admit his crimes? We want the people of the world to see how loyal and obedient the benevolent, righteous, and virtuous Prince Zhongshuan is. As you command, this servant will go immediately. Xiong Jinshui hurriedly bowed as if he had been granted amnesty and left to pass on the decree. The emperor, who was in charge of the capital, quarreled with the commander-in-chief, who was fighting the Tatars at the border. This had become an unprecedented show in Dezhou's imperial court. Not only did the common people enjoy the show, but even the officials of the imperial court were so shocked that their jaws almost dropped. Your Majesty seems to hate Prince Zhongshuan to the bone. He can't wait to pin a crime on him and bring him back to be beheaded. Wang Yi was Your Majesty's sworn brother and had made great contributions to the imperial court. In the end, it was very likely that he would end up being killed, let alone people like them. Therefore, during this period of time, the imperial court was jittery. The ministers all had their tails between their legs, and the entire capital was filled with a tense atmosphere. In the quietest residence in the capital, Yu Qiyan and Gu Shixiang sat opposite each other. Chapter 1160. Yu Qiyan lowered his head, a few strands of white hair hanging down. The deep creases between his eyebrows were very obvious even when he was not frowning. Where can we go if we leave the capital? Gu Shixiang coughed several times. He was over 90 years old and had long since lost his strength, so his voice was very weak when he spoke. Wang Yi, although you are still the Zhenan Wang in the capital, you should know better than me whether or not this Zhenan Wang has any real power, and how thick the irony is. The reason why Li Qitian kept us alive was to show off his glorious achievement of wiping out Great Yen. The reason why we relied on him to survive was actually built on Li Qitian's trick. Now that the situation is changing, Li Qitian has repeatedly done stupid things, ruined his own reputation, and caused public opinion to lean towards Pang Shao. In this old man's humble opinion, these two people will definitely fight in the future. If we continue to stay here in the future, Wang Yi will likely be affected. It is better to take advantage of the fact that Li Qitian has not noticed this place and quietly escape. In the future, the sky will be high and the land will be wide. The sky will be wide and the land will be wide. Yu Qiyan bitterly smiled and shook his head. The wrinkles at the corners of his eyes deepened because of his bitter smile. You mean, after we leave, we will be an ordinary farmer? If we want to live a peaceful life, Wang Ye's best choice is to be an ordinary farmer. In the future, we will buy a few mu of land, buy some real estate, and marry a wife. We will forget the past, forget our own origins, and be a person without a past, only a future. The room was silent. Yu Qiyan's eyes were hazy with tears, but in the end, he cried and laughed. I really can't accept this. I can't accept this. Ever since Imperial Father gave me that mess, everything I have done was because I was forced to do so. But why did all of this happen? Why? Why do I have to go through this kind of life? Gu Shixiang sighed and patted Yu Qiyan's trembling shoulder. This is fate. Wang Yi has enjoyed glory and wealth in his life, and also experienced the pain of the destruction of his country. If he can completely let go, it is not a bad thing to live a peaceful life. Yu Qian raised her head and looked at Gu Shixiang through her tears. Gu Shixiang nodded encouragingly at him. All right, we'll do as you say. Let's find a time to think of a way to escape. Gu Shixiang nodded in satisfaction. This old man has assisted 3 generations of emperors in his life. If I can protect you and keep you safe and away from disaster, I will not let down my ancestors. If it weren't for your help, I'm afraid I would have died long ago. Yu Qian shook his head and sighed. I used to have a lofty heart, but I didn't have the ability to do so. I just gave you trouble for no reason. Now that everything has passed, I feel as if I've just woken up from a dream. This world had long belonged to someone else. And if I can live on like this, it can be considered good fortune. You're too serious. In the end, this old official is useless. Old teacher. Yu Qian and Gu Shixiang both felt extremely sad. They hugged each other and cried bitterly. The next day, the chief official of Jinan Wang's residence discovered that Yu Qian and Gu Shixiang were missing. He hurriedly reported the news to Li Qitian. When Li Qitian heard about it, he was silent for a moment. He casually ordered, "Go after them." Then he didn't say anything else. In his eyes, it didn't matter whether Yu Qian went or stayed, whether he lived or died. He kept such a useless emperor alive just to play with him. If he lost him, then he lost him. It wasn't a big deal to just think of it as losing a lapdog. What was important was the current war in Beijiang and Pang Zhao's attitude. In front of everyone, Li Qitian's anger was directly proportional to the anxiety in his heart. At this time, Pang Zhao was already a general who didn't obey military orders. He also had a large number of troops in his hands. Li Qitian himself had also been on the battlefield. He was most clear about the feelings of comrades who fought together on the battlefield. Objectively speaking, Pang Zhao was indeed a person who would easily attract people to follow him. First, Li Qitian was really worried that Pang Zhao on the front lines would respond to his call. Instead of dealing with Tayden, he would turn around and directly attack the capital. When that time came, what would he use to resist? Li Qitian knew that he didn't have the strength to fight against Pang Zhao. Right now, he could only pray that Tayden and Lu Heng were a bit stronger and that Pang Zhao would consume a bit more of their forces. He vaguely felt that his side could win this time. But if they could consume more of their forces, wouldn't Pang Zhao have to think twice before coming back to the capital to cause trouble? Qin Yining sent Tian Jizi's obituary directly to the military camp. When Mu Jinghu heard about it, he was so shocked that he couldn't control himself. It can't be. Master said that she would live to be almost 120 years old. How could she have died like this? Pang Zhao pursed his lips and patted Mu Jinghu's shoulder guiltily. I'm sorry, blockhead. I was too selfish to transfer you to my side. If I didn't bring you here and you focused on staying by your master's side, she wouldn't have died. Mu Jinghu shook his head, his eyes still lifeless. This matter has nothing to do with you. I came to protect you. Firstly, it was my idea, and secondly, it was also Master's idea. She wanted me to stay by your side, but I didn't expect. But Fairy Lady died to save Sister Yi. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. Pang Zhao didn't feel much about Tian Jizi's death. But he and Mu Jinghu were close friends, and he knew that the purpose of Tian Jizi's master accepting Mu Jinghu as his disciple was to protect Tian Jizi. Now that Mu Jinghu was no longer by Tian Jizi's side to protect him, and Tian Jizi was shot while saving Qin Yining and died from her injuries, Pang Zhao felt very guilty. Mu Jinghu was stunned for 2 days before he gradually accepted the truth. Because the people of Tianji sect and Qiu Feishan had sent him letters. One letter said that Tianji's body had been buried in Tianji's sect, and the other letter was a consolation and confession. Qiu Feishan still often wrote letters to Mu Jinghu to express her feelings, and Mu Jinghu's heart had long been shaken. Now that he suddenly heard the news of Tianji's death, his heart was at its weakest. Qiu Feishan's letters made him feel better, and his rejection of Qiu Feishan was also not so strong. The war with the Titan had progressed to its climax. At the beginning of the third month, Peng Xiao and Ji Ziyu led the army to the border, forcing Si Qin and Lu Heng's troops to retreat to the desert. Lu Heng looked at the yellow sand in front of him, and his thoughts had already flown far away. That day when he and Qin Yining were kidnapped by Si Qin, they were forced to cross this desert. Thinking back to that day, the scene seemed to be right in front of him. At that time, Qin Yining respected him and trusted him. But now, he had become a traitor to the country, and Qin Yining's husband had become the vanguard to eliminate the traitor. In this lifetime, he might not be fated to meet Qin Yining. What are you thinking about? Si Qin came out of the tent and saw Lu Heng standing by the desert. Suspicion flashed in his eyes. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.